There are memories that remain vivid even after over a decade, back when Demian was just 25 years old. The first time setting foot on the battlefield, that very first moment of having to take a human life. The instant when blood fell onto the tile floor in crimson drops. And then the time he wiped out over 2,000 enemy soldiers. And then his breathing gradually grew faint. Finally, his body collapsed to the ground, and after that, the screen shifted to a scene of a morning at the town hall. The red-haired boy stared coldly at the contract while across from him, a middle-aged man and his partner kept babbling on, the gist being that all the insurance money from his parents' passing would be managed by this uncle. If you've checked the papers thoroughly, then please sign right here. Pucker feigned kindness as he urged his nephew, "That's right, Demian. You don't need to overthink the paperwork, just put your pen to the paper and it'll all be settled." The man rested his chin on his hands, smirking as he coaxed him, "Don't worry, just leave everything to me. By the time you're a grown man, I'll pay back every single cent." Demian's fingers tightened slightly on the paper as he suddenly remembered that it was this very day that turned his whole life upside down. Demian decisively tore the contract to shreds and coldly declared, "I will only receive the insurance money through the Imperial Bank, and it must be under my name alone." Pucker stared at the fluttering scraps of paper in shock, thinking, "What is this?" Demian added with indifference, "And don't forget to add a special clause. If anyone else comes to withdraw the money without my proof, signature, or documentation, under no circumstances are you allowed to release it." His gaze was firm and steady, leaving no room for refusal. Pucker was so angry that his hands began to tremble violently. The man grabbed Demian by the collar, shouting, "What the hell are you doing, you little brat? Just sign the damn thing and quit being so difficult." Expecting the boy to be apologetic, Pucker was stunned when Demian smirked and muttered to himself, "I was actually worried he'd fake being nice and try to brush it off." Before Pucker could finish cursing about what the hell was going on, a punch flew out, sending him rolling across the floor. Demian smiled with satisfaction, praising him, "Thanks, uncle, for keeping that same miserable face I remember so well." As he turned toward Dalek, the man immediately recoiled in fear. Dalek scrambled to dig through his bag, stammering, I can add the additional clause right now, sir." The current situation made Demian drift into deep thought. If it were before, he was only 13 and couldn't have done anything, but he smiled with genuine pleasure. "Things are fine now because I've been reincarnated back into the past." Returning to his memories of the previous life, Demian had to drag his exhausted body through a battlefield littered with corpses. He panted heavily, cursing under his breath, "Damn it. I told you from the very beginning that this was a crazy operation." Demian, who was the captain of the Baroque Kingdom's penal unit at the time, could only grit his teeth in frustration, thinking, how can only 100 men take down a force of over 2,000? He suddenly gagged and spat out blood. His vision began to blur. Demian reached out weakly toward a soldier who had fallen in battle. Helping the other man close his eyes to rest in peace, regret flooded his mind, even though the campaign had ultimately succeeded. Demian knelt in despair before his comrade's body, muttering, "I'm sorry. If only I had been a little stronger back then, I could have protected all of you." Unwilling to accept it, he punched the ground hard, "Damn it all." Demian stumbled, clutching his waist, as it seemed his body couldn't hold on for much longer. As his figure swayed in the air, he speculated, "I guess I'm about to kick the bucket now." His dirty steel helmet was tossed into a corner. Demian lay there helplessly, surrendering his life to fate, and raised a hand to cover his eyes, which were brimming with emotion. Or maybe it's just because I'm dying that I'm thinking about all this stuff. If I had enlisted earlier instead of waiting until I was 25, things might have been different. Hot tears rolled down his cheeks as he bit his lip, trembling, "Just once. I wish heaven would give me another chance. I swear I would dominate the battlefield with my brothers, but it's too late now." In his flashback to his previous life, Demian took his final breath, thinking he had surely perished right then and there. But luckily, a miracle had occurred, and unexpectedly Demian had returned to the past. And to the time 17 years ago, of all things. He looked at his two smooth hands, which had never experienced life or death. Next, he lifted his shirt to examine his small stomach. The mana core located in the lower abdomen was the most important thing for warriors cultivating magic. Unlike his past life, Demian's current mana core was still perfectly intact. In this life, he could completely teach himself how to master his mana. However, Demian was still hesitant. In his previous life, after his uncle cheated him out of all his insurance money and kicked him out, he had to live in hiding and do every menial chore in the underworld. An orphan abandoned by his guardian, he even had to go to prison for the crimes of a mid-level thug in a street gang. He had thought his life was over when he was forced to enlist and pushed out onto the battlefield. Yet someone like him actually had a day like this. Demian plopped onto the soft bed, bewildered. Who would have thought I'd eventually climb to the rank of captain? He concluded with boredom, but in the end, I just ended up dead anyway. While Demian was lost in his tangled thoughts, the faint sound of footsteps suddenly echoed from outside, but regardless, the time I spent in the military was still. He carefully sprang out of bed, uninvited guests, huh? Demian cautiously grabbed the knife from under his pillow. The person outside slowly pushed the doorknob. The moment the door creaked open, Demian surged out like a wild beast, knife in hand, causing the group of assassins to jump in surprise. What the hell? He powerfully drove his weapon into the thigh of the person nearest to him. As the man screamed in pain, he immediately pulled the knife out. Damn, only got it in halfway. The remaining assassin reacted quickly and lunged forward, roaring like a madman. You bastard, I'm going to kill you. Demian nimbly dodged the first knife strike. The frenzied assassin attempted another thrust. He successfully ducked and avoided it. Afterward, he gifted his opponent a knife wound right in the leg. A bloodthirsty glint flashed in Demian's eyes as he asked sharply, "Who sent you here?" The two strangers lay sprawled on the ground, wailing miserably as both of them had been stabbed in the thigh. Demian grabbed the remaining one by the neck. He raised his knife to interrogate him. Was it Pucker who sent you? Seeing that the man wasn't going to talk, he gave him a sharp hit. I asked you, was it Pucker who sent you? While he was in the middle of it, Demian suddenly heard someone whispering about him from afar. That brat is really scary. He turned to see someone approaching Muckman, who walked in as if it were his own house and said, "Have I introduced myself yet?" He thought to himself, Muckman showing up here means he was busy dealing with this strange guy, but seeing a bigger prize, he let the other one go. Demian suddenly smirked and began to tell a story. So, 17 years ago at that time, in the alley of a small street, Demian was grabbed by a group of strangers and he struggled and screamed violently, "Let me go, it hurts." Even hiding in this slum, getting caught right away is really strange. They kicked him hard, then they handcuffed him and took him away. Demian still held onto the image of Pucker's greedy face. He realized that his being captured was all part of that man's plan. The more he spoke, the tighter Demian pressed the knife against the guy. He slowly stood up. He pointed his knife straight at Muckman and said, "That bastard, he dared to betray me, huh?" Muckman's eyes looked back at him, filled with unspeakable hatred. Without another word, the man lunged forward. Demian reacted quickly and managed to dodge the guy's attack. His speed also left Muckman feeling a bit shocked. His calm expression made the man even more creeped out. Demian thought with exhaustion, was Muckman always this weak? No matter how fast Muckman was, he couldn't even touch a hair on Demian's head. He felt smug. "I have a very special ability. Being unable to hit me makes you angry, right?" Muckman yelled. "You little brat." Demian was busy thinking. After going through thousands of beatings and dying and coming back to life 100 times, at some point I started to see through all of an opponent's moves. Impatience was clearly visible in the man's eyes, and at the very moment his enemy was about to strike from his eyes. Demian scanned every gesture of Muckman, the direction he placed his feet, the angle of his waist, waiting for the movement at his shoulder. By the time he made his move, he had already predicted it 10 seconds ago, so he dodged even more smoothly than a dancer. It was all obvious that he was aiming for his head. Muckman was furious but couldn't do anything. The more the man lost his cool, the easier it was for Demian to predict him. This little rat is too obvious. Luckily, he managed to grab Muckman's wrist. The sword was knocked far away. Muckman lost his weapon and was at a disadvantage. He wanted to blow up the whole castle just to get it over with, as there was no saving it now. "You bastard." Taking a stab to the flank left Muckman with no strength to resist. The man couldn't believe it. No way. No matter how you look at him, he's just a kid. How could he? Demian found it annoying, so he pulled the knife out to let him die in pain. Muckman could only look up and moan incessantly. He's clearly only 13 years old. He used the coolest expression he'd ever had to ask, "Want to know how I blocked you?" Demian proudly held up the knife. "It's nothing big, it's just that I saw everything you were aiming at. You just lifted your hand and I already guessed everything." Muckman's face was as green as a monkey's butt, and after hearing that, he was so angry he wanted to cough up blood. What kind of ridiculous nonsense is that? Before the man could say anything more, he pointed his knife at his face and said, "Believe it or not, it's up to you because it's the truth." With his last bit of strength, he had to try one last scare. Muckman began his psychological attack. You think I'm the only one if this gets out to the others. Unfortunately, he met Demian, whose head was harder than stone. You're about to lose your life here, how the hell is it going to get out? Conversely, he took the opportunity to fish for information. You're a smart guy, surely you know what you should do, right? Was it Pucker who sent you? Muckman, like the previous ones, refused to utter a single word. Demian said something half jokingly, half seriously. Answer properly if you don't want to be a cripple for the rest of your life. The man still couldn't believe his eyes. That gaze, how can it belong to a 13-year-old? Demian's blood-red eyes also made him terrified. Finally, Muckman opened his mouth and confessed, "That's right, Pucker hired me." Before he could say more, he shouted him into silence. "All right, that's enough." Muckman still didn't understand what was happening. "What do you mean?" Then a basic expert-level slash. His throat was cut like a chicken being prepared for dinner. Demian turned away coldly. "That's right, even if I leave, I still have to clean up the mess first." He thought to himself, living to 30, one of the few things I learned is to limit making enemies as much as possible. But if by any chance you already have enemies, he locked their bodies in a room, and he had to stomp them into the ground so they couldn't even raise their heads again. At a small house located deep in the forest, Montauk looked at his watch and speculated, "At this hour, things over there should be finished." Pucker seemed to be frustrated with Demian. "You bastard, come here." Montauk was still boasting. "Once I finish this, I'll drag him here, don't worry, sir." He said to the man, "To capture a little brat, you have to mobilize me too. You must be furious, huh?" Pucker slammed his hand on the table, his face bruised. "It's all because of that bastard that I..." Because he was so agitated, he felt a sharp pain in his head. "Wait." He stopped talking and turned to reassure him that he would settle it immediately. "Just wait a little longer and don't you dare use the excuse that I arrived a little late to try and cut my pay." No sooner had he finished speaking than there was a sound of the door being pushed open. Montauk thought, "He's here, huh?" Pucker was burning with impatience. "I just want to mince him up immediately, but the insurance contract is in the way." He thought angrily, "Just need to settle that contract and I'll deal with that little brat." As soon as the door was pushed open, a knife was thrown in. Montauk's face darkened. How can this be? The knife was driven straight into the ground. Pucker saw this scene and was also terrified. Montauk seemed to discover something that wasn't right. Did it fail? Demian walked in confidently. The man asked, "Are you Demian?" He also replied kindly, "That's right, you lackey." Seeing himself being called a lackey, Montauk was a bit puzzled. Demian glared at him and said, "Aren't you just the lackey of the fat pig standing behind you? That's why you're so obedient to his orders, right?" Montauk called out loudly, "Hey, Pucker." He blatantly extorted money from him. "I have to triple the fee, you know." Pucker screamed, "Triple?" While negotiating with Pucker, my side suffered heavy losses, so that's only natural. He pulled out his sword to deal with Demian. Montauk's years of observation in the business told him, "See the blood stain on the end of that stick." He raised his sword and faced Demian without the slightest fear. "Looks like there's a variable outside of my expectations." Pucker's face drained of all color. The price he had to pay made his heart ache, but triple is. Sensing the hesitation, Montauk pretended to lose patience and made a gesture of sheathing his sword. "Then I'll withdraw." Witnessing that action, the man was extremely panicked. "Wait." Pucker stood frozen in place, his eyes filled with hesitation and fear as he stared at Demian on the opposite side. A dense, suffocating wave of killing intent radiated from his body, thick enough to stifle the very air around him. After a moment of intense inner turmoil, he finally gritted his teeth and made his decision. "I'll pay 3 times the amount." Even though his heart ached at the loss of such a large sum, he had no other choice. If Montauk left now, he was a dead man. Seeing that his extortion attempt had been a complete success, Montauk flashed a smug, triumphant smile. "Deal." He immediately put on an innocent face, shrugging nonchalantly as if he were just a bystander to the conflict. "Look, even though my guys got handled, I don't hold any personal grudges, it's just business, right?" Demian didn't even bother to give him any respect, staring back with cold, dead eyes. "Well, I have a grudge. Because of you lot." The savage roars of the men still echoed in his ears. "You little brat, once I catch you, you're as good as dead." The bone-deep agony that had clawed at his body and soul back then, Demian would never forget it, not even in death. He had spent the first half of his life living like trash in the slums, and on top of that, his mana core had been shattered. It was from that very moment of darkness that he swore to himself he would have his revenge at any cost. He was never going to let them off the hook that easily. His hand tightened around his spear. "So don't ask why, just die." Being looked down upon with such arrogance by a junior hurt Montauk's pride deeply. "You little brat with an attitude problem." The razor-sharp spear tip suddenly shifted direction, aiming straight for the vulnerable spot between his opponent's legs. This vicious move terrified him and he didn't dare take another step forward. This son of a bitch, he's aiming for my crotch, he's definitely not someone to mess with. Demian immediately dropped into a combat stance, gripping the spear shaft tightly with both hands to form a perfectly straight line. The sound of clashing weapons rang out sharp and piercing, echoing off the four walls of the room. Facing a relentless barrage of sword attacks, Demian was forced to continuously retreat to break out of the pincer move. Seeing his opponent occupied with defending, Montao immediately resorted to his dirty tricks, the moment he's distracted guarding his face. A perfect vision of victory had already been mapped out and manifested in his mind. I'm going to slash his thighs to shreds. Montao's free hand shifted, gripping his sword blade to prepare for a lethal killing blow. Just as he had calculated, Demian slightly tilted his head to the side to dodge the direct punch. He poured every ounce of his remaining strength into a powerful thrust of the sword, aiming straight for the boy's thigh. Here is the real trick. However, the subsequent turn of events went completely off course, causing Montao's heart to skip a beat. With just a light, graceful step in his footwork, he easily sidestepped the incoming sword tip, the trick of using the dagger in the right hand as the main attack. Demian utilized the butt of the spear. He struck powerfully at the vulnerable pressure points all over his body. He glanced coldly at the man standing frozen in shock and sneered, I knew exactly what you were doing from the very beginning. Montao's jaw clamped shut with an audible click. Damn it, you little brat. The veins on his forehead and temples throbbed violently and spit flew as he let out a bestial scream. I'm going to kill. However, before the threat could even leave his throat, an intense, searing pain washed over him, choking his words. The pressure points that had just been struck by Demian's spear tip suddenly began to tear open. All of Montao's strength drained away. He stared coldly down at the defeated man collapsing pathetically at his feet. You might be stronger than a piece of trash like Muckman, but at the end of the day, you're nothing more than a street thug. After finishing off the obstacles in his way, he finally shifted his gaze toward the true objective of this trip. Witnessing the entire horrific scene, Pucker was shaking uncontrollably from head to toe. Demian, wait, let me explain. Ignoring those useless, babbling pleas, he stepped closer, one step at a time. The fear of imminent death caused the man to completely lose his grip on reality, his hands flailing wildly at the air. Don't come any closer. A piercing, desperate scream echoed through the dense forest before dissolving into the silent, late-night air. A significant amount of time had passed since that bloody night. In a quiet office, a voice spoke up. Mr. Demian, I will go ahead and deposit a total of 6 platinum coins and 650 gold coins into your account then. The first thing Demian did after cleaning everything up was to collect his insurance money. He carefully checked the terms in the ledger while replying in a low voice, I understand. After completing the necessary paperwork, he stood up and bowed politely to say goodbye. I'll leave everything to you. The man opposite him quickly placed a hand over his chest, bowing slightly in respectful return. Yes, thank you for your trust. Following the boy's retreating figure, the man hesitated for a moment as if debating something before boldly asking, If I may I ask where you are heading next? Looking at his carriage, it seemed as though he was going quite a long distance. Demian had no intention of hiding his future plans. I'm planning on joining the military. This blunt answer was completely outside of anything he had anticipated. Joining the army, you're certain? Yes, because there are a few people I need to meet. On the desolate, dirt road, there was only the steady rhythm of carriage wheels thudding against the ground. Demian sat inside the wagon, watching the scenery recede behind him. Thinking about the events of the past, the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled up with nostalgia. My comrades are there and that's true, but in the end, the army is the only place where I truly belong. Regardless, in just 5 years, the entire landscape would be completely transformed. Most young, able-bodied men would be forced into mandatory military service. A period of chaotic war that no one could escape was already looming on the horizon. Demian slowly placed his hand over his chest, the extreme pain of his past life suddenly rushing back. Now, the incident where my mana core was shattered in the slums will no longer happen. Before making this decision to enlist, he had spent a significant amount of time weighing his options and considering everything extremely carefully. Instead of waiting until the late age of 25, voluntarily enlisting while he was still young would be much more advantageous. For now, I'll just head to the capital and use the Delft mana circulation method to train for a week, and then I'll apply for the third training camp. Demian lifted his head, his deep eyes looking up at the vast sky through the carriage window. This time, I won't let the era toss me around like a wind vane anymore. He was determined to break the chains of fate with his own two hands and be the one to master it. A week later, the sturdy city walls along with the soaring watchtowers of the capital finally appeared before his eyes. The sound of a cloth-wrapped spear tip stabbing forcefully into wooden targets echoed with deep, dull thuds. The soldiers and people around them couldn't help but be amazed. "What's up with that kid? He looks so young. Where on earth did he learn that spear technique?" Demian didn't even pay attention to their murmurs. His entire focus was on every movement of his spear. He retracted his spear and looked down at his palms, which were once soft but were now torn from overexertion. "Do I need to bandage these up?" He clicked his tongue in frustration. As expected, this body is still way too tender. Demian felt a bit annoyed and uncomfortable with his current weakness, a stark contrast to the calloused, rugged hands he once possessed. A man who had been watching for some time could no longer contain his patience, clearing his throat a few times to start a conversation. "Are you here to apply as a soldier?" Demian stopped his movements and turned around politely. "Yes, that's correct." Raben skipped the cumbersome formal introductions and went straight to the point. "Your spear technique looks the part. Where did you learn it?" A flash of high alert rose in Demian's heart. Did he realize this is the kingdom's premier spear style? The kingdom's premier spear style. The name sounded a bit funny, but it was the most popular spear technique used by the kingdom's soldiers. His sharp brain instantly fired to find a reasonable excuse to brush it off. "This is a spear technique passed down to me by my late father, sir." Raben felt that he had intruded on someone else's family affairs. "I'm sorry, I asked something I shouldn't have. Please forgive me." Demian stood still, his whole body radiating an upright and resolute aura. "No worries at all. Ever since I was young, my father was always proud of the military, so I was influenced by him and decided to join the army." His mature, smooth demeanor and high-minded ideals had completely scored absolute points in the other person's eyes. "You're in." Demian couldn't help but blink in confusion. "Yes." Raben realized he had let something slip that he shouldn't have. "No, I just misspoke." To clear the awkwardness, he awkwardly steered the conversation in a new direction. "Anyway, what's your name?" He stood up straight, following military protocol, and placed one hand behind his back to introduce himself clearly. "I am Demian." Raben smiled with satisfaction, stepping forward to pat his shoulder firmly as an encouragement. "All right then, I wish you the best of luck." Watching the man stride away, he politely bowed his head and called out, "Yes, thank you very much." As soon as the surrounding space became quiet again, Demian suddenly stiffened. He felt a warm, simmering wave of heat from his Danshan region constantly heating up and radiating throughout his entire body. This feeling. Demian couldn't hold back his emotions and flashed a look of supreme joy. "I can finally use mana now." The mana accumulation method of the Delft House, a secret technique created by a Delft genius 15 years in the future. The conditions to learn it were extremely strict, but it was famous for being the most effective method to date. Memories of his previous life, so familiar and warm, suddenly flashed through Demian's mind. "Since my mana core was shattered in my previous life, I risked everything to practice it, clinging to a faint hope that it would work." The image of his comrade Darian surfaced in his memory, stupidly scratching his head and complaining. "Captain, why do you keep banging your head against that training method?" Even Bergen, standing next to him, had the same question, shrugging in agreement. "Besides, you can't even use mana, right?" Being teased by his subordinates, he glared at them with sharp eyes to threaten them. "What was that, you little brats?" A light breeze blew across the training ground, pulling Demian back to reality. "I used to get teased like that back then, but it definitely wasn't in vain." The appearance of mana had reduced the anxiety in his heart by half. "Now, I just need to pass the exam." Demian didn't continue training. He let his eyes scan the vast training ground. Seeing a group of people gathering and whispering in the distance, he slowly walked toward that crowd. "And that reminds me, I wonder if he was in this third training camp too." Demian smiled slightly when thinking of his comrade who had been through life and death with him in the past, his heart full of expectation. "I wonder what he looks like now." In the middle of the vast training ground, the applicants were arranged into neat, horizontal rows. The first test was to lift a boulder. It sounded simple, but hoisting a 30 kg rock over your head wasn't easy. This was a great way to weed out those recruits who only had superficial enthusiasm. Demian focused all his energy, pouring his strength into his arms to hoist the large rock over his head. "Come on!" The person in charge standing next to him immediately recorded it in the book and announced loudly, "Candidate Demian, pass." A few drops of sweat ran down his cheeks, but Demian's face didn't change color. Once he reached 1-star mana, this challenge was nothing. And with that, the first test concluded. The next part was. Gappo took a deep breath to catch his wind, then used his thunderous voice to shout to the entire field, "All right, on to the second test." Demian stood among the crowd of large, muscular soldiers, remaining silent to listen to the announcement. The endurance run officially begins. Gappo began to explain the rules concisely. The time limit is 1 hour and 30 minutes. You must complete the course before time runs out. Bumping shoulders with other candidates and minor collisions are allowed, but you are absolutely forbidden from attacking each other. He had already known about this rule from his previous life and immediately saw through the plot hidden behind the seemingly humanitarian regulation. Because of that rule, there are definitely examiners disguised as runners in the crowd. Sure enough, when he scanned the field, Demian noticed a few individuals who possessed an aura and momentum that were quite different from the rest. Gappo finished his speech with a stern warning. Additionally, anyone who strays off the designated course will be disqualified immediately, so remember that well. Not only was he not intimidated, but the corners of his mouth also curled up into a sly smile. This test should be fun. On the ground, a bright red line was marked to indicate the starting line of the race. While Demian was warming up his muscles, a young man suddenly approached him. "Are we in the same group?" He stopped his movements and looked around to confirm. "Me?" The other person nodded repeatedly, clearly interested. "Yes, you. I've been watching you for a while now." Demian felt confused about the young man's true purpose. "Watching me? What for?" He silently observed the person in front of him. "Wait a second. His face looks familiar." Before Demian could dig deeper into his memories, Appel took the initiative to step forward. "You have to ask." He deliberately lowered his voice to a whisper in Demian's ear. "You know how to use mana, right?" He cautiously stepped back to keep a safe distance from his opponent, quickly analyzing the situation in his head. There's no law against civilians using mana, but usually, commoners who can use it either have a wealthy family backing them or a very special power standing behind them. Looking closely at the other's delicate features, a suspicion suddenly popped into Demian's head. "Don't tell me this guy is." To verify his suspicion, he didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "Anyway, what's your name?" Appel was a bit surprised by the sudden question, pointing his index finger at his own nose. "My name." Right after that, he regained his natural demeanor, placed a hand on his chest, and introduced himself clearly. "I am Appel." Even though he had imagined it to a certain extent, hearing that name with his own ears still left Demian shaken. Appel, was he at this training camp? The person who became a general and was titled an earl at just 30 years old, a legend among legends. For Demian in his previous life, that name was like a bolt of lightning to the ears. He was one of the most successful commoners in history. Everyone admired him. Appel proactively extended a hand, expressing his desire to become friends. "Anyway, there aren't many people our age here, so I'm a bit bored. Let's do our best." After realizing the other's illustrious future status, the defensiveness in his heart quickly evaporated. "Yeah." He reached out comfortably, firmly grasping Appel's waiting hand. "Well, since he's being so friendly, I don't see any reason to be harsh." After all the candidates had finished their warm-ups, Gappo held a megaphone in one hand. "Everyone, get ready." The moment the sound of the starting trumpet rang out, hundreds of people simultaneously surged forward. Within a few short breaths, Demian kept a moderate pace and was overtaken by the group behind him. Watching their long strides and wind-whipping speed, he secretly mused. Are they planning to go all out right from the start? Other candidates in the crowd also realized the anomaly in the lead group too late. "What is that? What the hell are they doing?" The group of disguised examiners had gathered, creating a solid horizontal line blocking the path of the candidates. "Let's go." The candidates behind them struggled to catch up while whispering, "It looks like that's the wall of lament. I heard that getting past them is the real challenge of this test." Appel, running alongside Demian, heard this and asked skeptically, "Then wouldn't it be better if we just stick to their tails and pull ahead in the last minute?" Demian maintained his steady breathing while running. That's clearly a smart tactic, but he suddenly stamped his foot down, his body launching like an arrow leaving the bow. "Too bad that's not my style." Demian's sudden, bold burst of speed left Appel completely shocked. At the head of the race, the examiners were still maintaining a very stable and relaxed pace. "Just keep it easy and save your energy. After all, the real race only starts in the last 10 minutes. Yes, sir, understood. Black's sharp ears suddenly heard fast, heavy footsteps approaching from behind. At this rate, by the time we reached the finish line. Startled, he whipped his head around, only to see a small silhouette flying toward them. What crazy kid is that? Jian was also distracted by the sudden, heavy footsteps. Another suicidal kid popped up this year. Black saw this and warned him just to be sure, don't hurt him, just hold him off so he gets scared. He massaged his bulging arm muscles and flashed a devious smile. I can't promise what will happen if he crashes into my steel shoulders, but I'll try to go easy on him. However, before the smug smile could even fade, a small hand from behind lunged forward, gripping his shoulder and pushing hard. Out of the way. Jian was stunned for a heartbeat. What? Demian skillfully leveraged his weight on Jian's shoulder to push off, leaping past the group of examiners. They had been distracted for just a single second, and they were already being left behind by a significant distance. When he regained his composure, Black panicked and shouted, "What are you doing? Stop him!" The other examiners in the group also immediately snapped out of their shock. Yes, sir. Even without looking back, Demian could feel their heavy footsteps closing in. The examiners really do have superior skills to suppress the candidates, but then again. He inhaled deeply once more, pouring his strength into his legs to accelerate and widen the gap. They are just examiners at a training camp, after all. Witnessing his recklessness and breathtaking breakout, Appel, running behind, couldn't help but laugh heartily. What is up with this kid? I don't know. His own fighting spirit was also strongly stimulated by Demian's actions. I can't let him pass me that easily. Appel stamped his foot to accelerate, leaving the lagging candidates behind to chase the boys back. Other ordinary candidates standing and watching the entire performance were completely shaken. What is playing like that even allowed? Let's follow him. Yes, just copy what he's doing. The result was that when the examiners looked back, they were completely horrified to see a wave of people rushing toward them with intense momentum. What the hell is this? The enthusiastic shouting of the candidates even carried over to the training ground on the other side. Zion heard the loud commotion and turned around in a daze, his heart mixed with curiosity. The situation at the second training field seems a bit unusual. Zulk, who knew some inside information, whispered, "It seems like a rather strange recruit just enlisted. Should we add more examiners?" The two of them were still hesitant when a deep, powerful voice cut them off. Just let them be. They immediately stood to attention and saluted. Chief Examiner Rabin, he looked toward the source of the noise and asked back in a nonchalant tone, "Do you want people to think we're cheating and rigging the test results? Whether they can break through or not depends on their own mettle." Watching the small silhouette leading on the other side, Rabin added coldly, "And the same goes for the losers." My eye for talent really wasn't wrong. He inwardly added with satisfaction, I didn't expect him to be the type to create such an unexpected variable. His actions had incited the others to charge forward. On the battlefield, those who always lead the purge are the ones who know how to light the fire. At this moment on the track, Demian clearly felt every muscle in his body reaching its limit. This is the 29th lap out of 30. He poured every remaining ounce of strength to sprint across the red line. Final stretch. Appel, with astonishing stamina, was also tailing right behind him. Hey, Demian. He glanced sideways, slightly distracted, to talk to Appel. You seem energetic enough. Appel seized the opportunity to lean in, whispering curiously in Demian's ear. Was this your plan from the start? Demian didn't quite understand the underlying meaning of the question. What do you mean? Appel tilted his chin toward the other candidates collapsing and sitting in a corner of the track. If we didn't know how to use mana, we would be in the same pathetic state as them. Demian tried to regulate his breathing, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile. If you've got an ace up your sleeve, why wouldn't you use it? Appel found himself increasingly interested in this new friend. You really are an interesting guy. While talking, the two of them simultaneously crossed the finish line of the final lap. You too. The person in charge at the finish line was still stunned, only managing to mutter, You too. Pass. In a quiet room filled with documents, a voice full of interest suddenly rang out. I heard there's an interesting kid who just entered the third training camp. Standing not far away, Casson clasped his hands behind his back and confirmed seriously. That's right. Instructor Rabin contacted me about that boy. He said he's only 13. That information immediately grabbed the other's attention. He placed his hand on the table and stood up. If someone as picky as Rabin says the kid is interesting. He paused for a moment, seemingly weighing the value of that assessment. Then I'm starting to get curious. Leonhardt narrowed his eyes, creating invisible pressure as he asked, So, what's the kid's name? At the same time, at the tall building, a group of people gathered as if something had caught their attention. In the middle of the courtyard was a giant bulletin board. After reading the content, someone clutched their head in despair. Damn it, how did I fail? No way, what about you? Beside those mournful sounds, there were quite a few people who couldn't hide their joy. I passed. I finally witnessed that sight. Demian found it hard to understand. Is that really worth being so happy about? The scene before his eyes involuntarily pulled him back to the arduous times of his previous life. Thinking back to the wartime, being forced to enlist was an everyday occurrence, and everyone tried every way to dodge the draft, constantly checking their soles and heels to see if they were blistered. Amidst that bustling atmosphere, he raised a hand to his chin and pondered silently. Come to think of it, these times are still peaceful, boring. Suddenly, someone called out his name, Demian. Hearing his name, he turned around with a look of suspicion. Appel. The other person immediately waved his hand excitedly. Congrats, now we're classmates, right? Those words made Demian quickly look toward the bulletin board. Really? You passed too? Appel nodded to confirm. Yeah, that's right, I even checked the list, your name is on it. While talking, he casually pointed to the top position on the board. It's right there at the very top, Demian, 13 years old. He nodded in acknowledgement. I just saw it. After passing the competitive selection process together, the atmosphere between the two became closer than before. If you need anything, let's help each other out. Even though it's not certain we'll be assigned to the same unit. Facing that enthusiasm, he maintained his calm composure and replied, I'm looking forward to it too. Leaving the crowded area, Appel suddenly remembered something and turned to ask, there's still a week until enlistment. What do you plan to do during this time? Demian didn't answer immediately. He took a few seconds to think before speaking slowly. I think I'll be quite busy. Looking into the distance, he added with a hint of mystery, I have a few things to take care of this week. Hearing that, the curiosity in Appel's heart was immediately stirred. He took a step closer and draped an arm over his shoulder. What the hell is so important? He just shook his head. Nothing big, I just need to buy a few necessary items before entering the camp. Hearing that, he suddenly remembered something important and hurriedly added, now that you mention it, the standard issue combat boots are notoriously stiff, so people say you must prepare extra insoles for the soles and heels. This information made him exclaim, really? These matters were nothing strange to Demian. He already knew all about them from his blood-soaked experience back then, but in order not to reveal his abnormality compared to his current identity, he still sincerely replied, regardless, thanks, I'll keep that in mind. Hearing this, Appel grinned with satisfaction. Don't mention it. Not wanting the conversation to continue revolving around himself, he took the opportunity to change the subject. What about you? What do you plan to do this week? The sudden question made him pause slightly. Me, I also have a few things to do. Seeing that unnatural expression, Demian realized the other person was hiding something. Are you sure? However, Demian didn't intend to dig deeper because he wasn't interested in meddling in other people's business. Yeah, prepare well for your stuff. See you next week, I'm heading out first. He also waved goodbye. Yeah, see you soon. At that very moment, a strange figure silently approached from behind. When the distance was only a few steps, that person slowly spoke up. Who is that? Hearing the familiar sound, Appel immediately turned his head. Alan. He involuntarily recalled the conversation between the two not long ago. Demian, why do you want to join the army? This made him a bit surprised. Huh. Seeing that reaction, he continued to explain what had been bothering him since earlier. If you can use mana to this extent, you don't look like an ordinary person at all. Hearing that, Demian glanced to the side and casually retorted, are you subtly bragging that you're not an ordinary person either? That blunt counterattack made Appel only able to offer a forced smile. Does it sound like that? Footsteps kept echoing on the ground. After a few moments of silence, he replied, because this is the only place I belong. Remembering that dialogue, Appel's lips curled up involuntarily. He was the same, surely he also had his own private sorrows that he couldn't speak of to others. Afterward, he turned and muttered to himself, I just have a feeling this is someone I'll be bumping into for a long time. Those words made Alan look confused. What do you mean? But he just shook his head, having absolutely no intention of explaining further. It's nothing, let's go. The old man bowed respectfully and replied, yes, young master, the items are already prepared over there. The familiar title hitting his ears made Appel suddenly stop his steps and sigh with frustration. Alan, I've told you not to call me young master in places like this. The old man leaned on his cane and followed with an apologetic tone. Yes, I apologize. Brilliant sunlight covered the rooftops along the busy street. Amidst the endless flow of people, Demian walked leisurely and constantly looked around. It's hard to believe. Enthusiastic bargaining mixed with laughter, creating a lively atmosphere. Can't you help me at all? Good God, I already said there's no way. He was a bit stunned. The capital in my memory was originally. In a flash, images of people with emaciated faces from hunger and faint pleas rushed back. Please, just one piece of dry bread is fine. Looking at the lively street in front of him, Demian silently calculated in his heart, this atmosphere will change within the next 5 years anyway. Before that time comes, I must quickly prepare as much as possible. As soon as that thought appeared, a series of plans were quickly rearranged. To do that, first I need to find the Weak Trading Company. When the era of war arrives, various weapons and practical artifacts on the battlefield, along with food, will become the most important things. That is when the role of merchant guilds becomes core. This made Demian suddenly remember something. In the past, the richest trading company on this continent was the Weak Trading Company. Amidst the rolling mountain ranges stretching to the horizon, a military unit was temporarily setting up camp to rest after many days of continuous marching. The quiet atmosphere was quickly broken when a soldier rushed over from afar. Captain, it seems like relief supplies are being transported over there. Looking towards a wagon train approaching, the man was suspicious. Isn't that the Weak Trading Company? Hearing that, Tyson also observed and slowly spoke. Rumor has it that they are the wealthiest guild currently. That remark immediately made the person next to him dissatisfied. Damn it, while our side is out here risking our lives on the battlefield, they are. However, before the conversation could go any further, Demian cut in. If not for the wheat and weapons they sell us, you also know they are donating for free, right? Hearing that, he looked embarrassed. I know, I just feel a bit bitter. Speaking of which, his gaze shifted back to the carts full of supplies being transported. But constantly doing charity with such large sums of money isn't easy. Pushing that story aside, Demian loudly called his teammates. Everyone, come and receive the relief supplies. The response immediately rang out from all over the camp. Understood. Standing there observing that scene, Demian quietly watched each person happily receiving their necessary food and supplies. Amidst the hustle, Ethan came from behind and suddenly spoke up. Captain, it seems that person over there is the owner of the Weak Trading Company. Hearing that, he immediately looked in the direction he pointed and confirmed, the guild master. Ethan pointed to the person standing busily directing the wagon train. Yes, do you see the one wearing the white cloak standing in the front row? But he looks just like an arrogant jerk. When his consciousness returned to reality, the harsh sunlight still stretched across the street ahead. Leaning his back against the wall by the road, Demian silently rearranged the information he knew. They said the Weak Trading Company had been doing charity even before the war broke out. Out of 40 trading companies in the capital, if the scope is narrowed down, there are probably only about 7 left. Because they also do charity work, I will start checking from the guilds with a large scale first. As the last rays of the day gradually disappeared behind the horizon, an orange-yellow color slowly covered the entire city. After a day of wandering everywhere, Demian stopped in front of the door of a trading company located at the end of the street. Is this the last one? With that thought, he crossed the threshold and went inside. Excuse me, is anyone here? Not long after the call, Weak slowly walked out from the inside. How can I help you? Just by seeing the other person, Demian immediately concluded in his heart, this is definitely the last one. He bowed to show respect and politely spoke. I heard that the Hamel Trading Company does charity, so I wanted to come and discuss investing for a good cause. That answer made him laugh with interest. A young person with such commendable thoughts. While moving to the tea table following the instructions, he calculated, until now it's all been garbage, but I still have to check each one. Slowly sitting down, he flashed a friendly smile and proactively introduced himself. I am the master of the Hamel Trading Company, Weak. Hearing that name, Demian couldn't help but be stunned. Weak. Outwardly, he maintained his composure, but inwardly, undercurrents were rising. Did I finally find him? Suppressing the thoughts swirling in his head, he quickly replied, yes, my name is Demian. He nodded and signaled toward the chair opposite. Yes, very nice to meet you. Let's sit down and talk more. Once settled, Demian couldn't wait any longer and hurriedly asked, asking this might be a bit impolite, but do you have any sons? This made Weak a bit confused. Huh. He looked at him for a few seconds and then suddenly laughed heartily. I don't have a son, but I have a daughter who isn't mature yet. This surprised him. A daughter? What is this? Is this another trick? As soon as the words were finished, an unexpected voice sounded. causing Demian to pay attention and turn around. The sudden call made Demian reflexively turn his head to look. "Dad, I'm back." As Dial walked in, he immediately recognized her as the master of the Weak Trading Company from his previous life. "Did I find her?" Weak pointed to her and introduced, "Greet him, dear. This is Demian. He's here to invest in our charity fund." Dial reached up to fix her hair, smiling, "Greetings, Mr. Demian." She asked expectantly, "You said you came to invest in our charity work." Demian looked up and replied, "Yes, that's right." He touched his chin, silently contemplating. Something is wrong. The Weak Trading Company master in the previous life was clearly a man, but the two of them look exactly the same and their ages match too. Demian looked up at Dial, examining her meticulously. "Don't tell me this beautiful face is actually a girl. How could she use the name Weak to take over the trading company?" She looked at him seriously and asked, "May I ask how much capital you intend to invest? The trading company will have different ways of using the money depending on the amount." He raised a fist to cover his mouth, speaking gently. "For now, I want to invest 300 gold coins. Later, depending on how things progress, I will inject more capital." Dial was startled and covered her mouth with her hand. 300 gold coins. Weak also couldn't believe it and confirmed, "Are you serious?" He squinted his eyes and raised a hand forward to inquire, "But if this is an investment and not a donation, do you have any specific requirements in exchange for this money?" Demian flashed a bright smile, clasped his hands together and requested, "I want to hold a portion of the Hamel Trading Company's shares in the form of receiving a portion of the profits to recoup the investment capital." Weak stared intently at him, exclaiming in astonishment, "A boy who is this willing to play big?" He silently calculated, at this age to have that much money. Could it be? Then he cautiously asked, "If you don't mind, may I ask where this source of money came from?" Demian closed his eyes, replying without much concern, "You don't need to worry about that. I just want to use the inheritance of my late parents for something useful." Weak heard this and quickly bowed his head to apologize. "I understand. I apologize for being rude." He smiled, waving his hand to dismiss it. "It's nothing at all. I completely understand." He looked straight at Demian and requested, "I think we need to have a meeting about the company's shares. Can we give you a definite answer then?" He also responded nonchalantly, "Yes, that would be great. See you all later." Dial was about to leave when she saw Weak with his hands over his chest in contemplation. "What's wrong, Dad?" He recalled that mature demeanor of Demian when negotiating. "Aren't you surprised? The boy is only 13 years old." Weak thought to himself, "I shouldn't recall it, but that look in his eyes is no joke. He is definitely not an ordinary child." He sighed with his hands over his chest. "What a pity. If the boy were about 5 years older, the two of you would really be a perfect match." Dial's face turned bright red as she shouted, "Dad." The sound of her embarrassment echoed inside the building. "What on earth are you saying?" Weak didn't care and teased, "Who knows, maybe he likes someone older." Dial angrily shouted, "Stop it, Dad." After finishing business with the Hamel Trading Company, time flew like a dog running in a field. In the blink of an eye, the day of enlistment arrived. Demian stood alone in front of the large gate. He looked forward and exclaimed, "Today is truly a brand new beginning." Demian raised a hand towards the sun high above. "Even if my previous life turned into smoke in vain, this life must be different." Then he clenched his fist with determination. "This time, I will be the one to swallow this entire empire." A while later, Demian brought his luggage into the room. "My unit is the 3rd Training Company, 1st Platoon, right?" He looked around. "I don't see any familiar faces. Did Appel get assigned to a different platoon?" Demian placed his luggage on the bed and lamented, "There's only one guy around here that's my age. What a pity." Right then, an excited sound rang out, making him look over. "Very happy to meet you all." The man stood at the door with his hands on his hips, looking in. "I am the one who will manage you for the next month, Platoon Leader Brian of the 1st Platoon." Then Brian raised 3 fingers to count carefully. "Right now, we will start inspecting personal belongings, food, water." His face sank as he formed his 3 fingers into a threatening fist. "Luxury items, especially if anyone brought alcohol or cigarettes, step out and confess immediately. Anyone I catch hiding them will get to taste them in a very fun way." Demian watched those on the neighboring beds begin to panic, crying out, "I quit smoking, but I accidentally packed some." Or, "The shopkeeper said bringing alcohol wouldn't be caught." He looked in that direction and sighed inwardly, "You idiots, if you buy it, hide it well, otherwise don't bother bringing it." Brian walked over and shouted coldly, "Dump all your belongings out right now." After a moment, he stood in front of Demian's bed, looked at the luggage on the bed, and announced, Nothing unusual here. Brian touched his chin, leaned over and inquired, "Say, how old are you? You look so baby-faced." Demian replied with a calm face, "I'm 13 years old." Hearing this, he was startled. 13. Kyle, who was sitting on the bed, angrily scolded, "Damn it, what kind of times are these? Now even a brat like that can join the army." Logan also puffed and shouted, "Do you think this life is a joke?" He saw Demian look over and his face darkened. "What are you looking at? Are you trying to talk back, you little brat?" He immediately closed his eyes, thinking to himself, there's no need to waste words arguing with a person like him. But Demian's eyes flashed with a bright red light, staring at Kyle. "I'll remember this face well. I have to let the old man taste how painful it is to be beaten to a pulp by a child." Logan, standing next to him, couldn't help but hug himself. "What is this? Suddenly I feel a chill down my spine." Brian's voice rang out, "You there?" He walked up to him and demanded, "Dump your entire backpack out for me to see." Logan heard this and explained in terror, "This is everything, sir." Brian's face sank, leaning close to him. "Do you need me to personally search your bag?" Logan panicked and took everything out of his basket. "No, I don't need that, sir. I'm dumping it out right now. This, and also." He stood with his hands on his hips, threatening coldly, "I'm warning you in advance, whoever dares to hide things and gets caught by me with contraband." The group thought of Brian's words and turned pale. "Get ready to run around the training field all night." He looked at the people around him and urged, "Hurry up and dump it all out." Demian saw this and felt extremely gratified. "Serves you fools right." A while later, Brian stood with his hands on his hips and walked back and forth, announcing, "That finishes the personal belongings inspection." He turned his head to look at the group, announcing, "Now I need to appoint a temporary student platoon leader to command the soldiers whenever I am absent." Brian reached into his pocket and took out a paper to check. "Let's see." Right when he saw that paper, he exclaimed in surprise, "In our platoon, there is a soldier who passed with a sky-high score." After putting the paper down, Brian looked at the group and shouted, "Demian, who is Demian? Step out and let me see." His eyes looked towards Kyle, who had a dark face in the corner. "Is it the guy from earlier?" To be a student platoon leader, character is just as important as ability. Brian walked up to him and inquired, "You are Demian, right?" Just then, Demian stepped forward. "It's me." He turned his head in surprise. "It's not that guy, then who is it?" Brian saw him and stood stunned with his eyes wide open. He tightened his grip on the paper, stuttering, You just said you were 13, didn't you?" Demian confirmed calmly, "Yes, that's right." Kyle heard this and looked over angrily, shouting loudly, "A brat like that wants to be a student platoon leader? Damn it! Since when did the army become a daycare center?" Brian stood with his hands on his hips and looked over. "Keep it quiet in that corner." He still wouldn't give up and retorted, "But what I said isn't wrong, sir." Kyle stood up and walked step by step in front of him. "A student platoon leader is the representative of the officer, right? Shouldn't they have to prove their leadership ability?" Then he pointed his index finger at Demian contemptuously. "If you let a brat like that take power, the discipline of our platoon will fall apart." His lips twitched into a smile. "I'm not interested in this troublesome platoon leader position, but this guy keeps trying to pick a fight." Then Demian decided, "All right, let me play along and see." Then he tilted his head and sneered provocatively, "I'm confident I'll do better than some guy who is all brawn and no brain." "Definitely." Kyle heard this and shouted furiously, "You brat, what did you just say?" Brian looked over to inquire, "Your name is Kyle, right?" He replied calmly, "Yes, sir, for now I will still take the position." Immediately after that, he reached out and gently grabbed Kyle's collar. A murderous aura radiated from Brian as he stared at him and shouted, "If you ever dare to belittle your teammates by calling them brats or any similar words again, then next time it won't just stop at a simple warning. Is that clear?" Kyle bowed his head and looked up at his serious face. "Understood, sir." Then Brian looked up at Demian. "However, what he said is not without reason. The authority of a student platoon leader requires true leadership ability." Kyle raised a hand and suggested, "Then how about this, platoon leader, why don't we?" He stood with his hands on his chest in front of Demian and said arrogantly, "Why don't you let this kid and me have a match? Whoever wins gets that seat. Wouldn't that prove both ability and authority?" Brian looked towards him to inquire, "Do you agree with this?" Demian closed his eyes and thought to himself, "I'll use this chance to reset the military discipline. All right, that's good." Then he pointed at Kyle and called out, "Then just beating this blockhead to a pulp is enough, right?" He asked back with a face full of fury. "Blockhead?" Brian looked towards the others in the room. "Do you all agree with this deal?" They all replied in unison, "Agree." He led the crowd to leave quickly. "Then there's no need to talk any longer. everyone, follow me to the shooting range to compete. Brian looked at Kyle's arrogant appearance, and Demian's calm face announcing, the match will begin immediately. Brian looked at both Kyle and Demian to inquire, the rule is that if an opponent surrenders, the fight must stop immediately. Are you ready? He flashed a smug smile and said, I'm ready. Demian closed his eyes, nodded, and spoke, I'm ready. Brian's voice rang out, announcing, then the match begins. Kyle rubbed his shoulder and muttered, thinking about bullying a child makes me feel guilty. Demian sighed and urged, quit yapping and come at me, you clod. The veins on his forehead popped out as he roared furiously, you little brat. Kyle's eyes flashed with bright red light as he charged, the reason you're getting beaten like a dog today is because of that mouth of yours. Demian stood perfectly still, silently assessing the situation. His speed is better than I expected. Compared to the soldiers in my previous life, he's definitely among the more capable ones. He watched as Kyle's figure closed the distance to right in front of him. Demian's eyes remained locked on the incoming fist, thinking to himself, it's only at that level after all. Then he leaned to the side and dodged. There's no way you're landing a hit on me. Kyle stared at the scene before him, unable to believe his eyes. He dodged it, it's like you knew exactly where my fist was going to come from. He then gathered his strength, preparing to throw another punch. It looks like you've picked up a few tricks somewhere, but you won't be able to dodge this one. Demian tilted his head and easily dodged once again, too slow. Kyle slammed his two fists together noisily. If you can dodge my punches, I'll just charge straight into you with my whole body. With that, he poured all his strength into sprinting straight toward where Demian was standing. Demian closed his eyes, sensing Kyle's hands getting closer. Kyle grazed past him again and shouted in frustration. Where did he go? Demian's voice rang out from behind, right here. Immediately after, Kyle let out a pained cry as he took a solid blow to the chest. Demian looked up at Kyle, thinking, taking a direct hit like that, it's going to be hard to stay on your feet. He watched the man let out a cry of pain and plant one hand on the ground to steady himself. You're more resilient than I thought. Kyle's expression darkened and he charged frantically toward him again. You bastard, I'm going to kill you. Demian hopped backward, evading his attack. This should be enough to finish him off now. Then he swung his fist and struck Kyle straight in the stomach. Demian watched as he clutched his stomach and collapsed to the ground. Bullseye. Kyle's head hit the ground hard as he lost consciousness on the spot. Demian brushed the dust off his hands. Looks like this brute has been knocked out. He then swept his gaze over the others with a look filled with killing intent. Is there anyone else who wants to try? Logan's group looked at each other, but still, no one dared to step forward. Immediately after, Brian's voice rang out, declaring, the sparring session is over. Rookie Demian wins. From now on, Rookie Demian is officially appointed as the student platoon leader. A moment later, Kyle walked out of the infirmary and closed the door gently. I'll be heading off now, he thought with a thoroughly annoyed expression. I never expected there'd be a day where I'd be carried to the infirmary in a state of unconsciousness like this. Kyle couldn't help but recall the punch from earlier. He couldn't remember anything that happened after being hit in the right flank. Could it be that I lost consciousness from that first strike of his? Kyle stood still in front of the door, quietly contemplating. I kept thinking that in this place there wasn't anyone who could be my match, yet I ended up losing so pathetically. The group inside the room was startled, watching him push the door open with a dark look on his face. They tentatively looked at Kyle and whispered, what do we do now? Should we stop him? We have to stop him, right? If we just let him keep going like this, he's going to end up back in the infirmary. Suddenly, Kyle walked up behind him and called out, causing Demian to look over. He knelt on the ground, bowed his head respectfully, and shouted, I admit my defeat. From this day forward, I will consider you my big brother. Demian was stunned on the spot, thinking in astonishment, what the hell, why is this guy suddenly acting like this? Did I accidentally hit him in the head too hard earlier? Then, Kyle looked up and stated seriously, you are the youngest person I have ever fought, but you are also the strongest. Respecting those who are stronger than me is only natural. Kyle's voice rang out, please accept me as your subordinate. Demian was also surprised on the spot. I thought he was just an arrogant, rude guy, but who knew he'd be someone who knows how to respect his superiors and follow others. Afterward, he extended a hand to make peace. There's no need to call me big brother, just calling me Demian is fine. Demian added with a bright smile, let's do our best from now on, Kyle. Kyle reached out and shook his hand. I'm looking forward to working alongside you, Demian. A week at the barracks passed by quickly after Demian's group enlisted. Brian stood with his hands on his hips, watching the group running and shouting, don't stop, look straight at the back of the person in front of you and keep running. Demian couldn't help but remark, The instructors are packing in such crazy exercises that time is flying by like the wind. After seeing everyone finish their run, Brian raised his hand and announced, "Training for today is over. Soldiers are dismissed to their barracks, but Demian, come with me." Upon hearing this, he followed the instructor, puzzled. What's going on? Where is he taking me all of a sudden? Demian followed Brian and stood in front of a room, confused. The administrative office. Is he planning to announce something? He looked at the group of people lined up neatly inside and wondered, those guys are here too. Demian stepped inside. Let's just go in and hear what they have to announce. Mason saw him and raised a hand to cover his mouth, exclaiming, "Where did this little shrimp come from? Oh damn, I let that slip out. I should have just kept that in my head." Demian looked up. He's skinny, looking no different than a scrawny toad. He silently imagined the scene in his head. Having this guy stand next to Kyle would probably be hilarious, seeing as their physiques are complete opposites. Mason replied with a thoroughly annoyed expression, gritting his teeth. "What are you staring at?" Demian answered calmly. "I was just curious to see how much wider those eye sockets could possibly open." He was just about to shout in anger when he suddenly heard a cough and stopped. "You little brat." Casson frowned and shouted to put a stop to it. "Order, is this place a place for you people to cause a scene?" Mason whispered a threat with a furious expression. "I'll deal with you later." From above, the voice continued. "It seems like all the student platoon leaders and soldiers from every unit are gathered here now." Casson looked straight at the group and explained, "The reason I've called you here today is to announce that the platoon matches will take place next week. This is an extremely important midterm assessment for the platoons, so all platoon leaders and soldiers must lead their units to prepare well. Is that clear?" The soldiers below clasped their hands behind their backs and replied in unison, "Yes, sir." Casson spoke up to dismiss everyone. "All right, dismissed. Return to your barracks." Mason walked up beside Demian and yelled, "Hey, you little brat." He raised his fist high and threatened loudly. "You little brat, you don't know how to watch your back, do you? Be careful or you'll get beaten to a pulp one of these days." Gerard walked up from behind, seeing this, and mocked him. "He's the one who doesn't know how to watch his back, isn't he? We're all student platoon leaders here, after all. He relies on being older than everyone else to act bossy. Instead of standing here blabbering and wasting time, wouldn't it be better to go train with your own platoon leader?" Mason turned back with a furious expression and shouted, "If it doesn't concern you, beat it, or do you want to get beaten up along with him?" Gerard smiled and replied, "That remains to be seen. Let's see who's the one getting beaten up." Afterward, he gestured toward Demian and said, "Hey, ignore that lunatic, let's go." Demian replied, "Yeah, let's go." Demian walked in front, letting out a sound of disdain. He turned back and asked, "Hey, what platoon are you in?" Mason gave a thumbs up and introduced himself arrogantly, "Platoon 4. I am the student platoon leader of Platoon 4. The corners of Demian's mouth curled into a bright smile. "All right, I'll remember that. See you at the platoon match, you idiot." While walking in the hallway, Gerard asked, "You're Demian, right?" He heard this and asked in surprise, "How do you know my name?" Gerard explained with a bright smile, "I've been hearing your name constantly from that guy Appel in my platoon. I heard you placed first in the practical skills exam." He looked toward Demian and officially introduced himself. "I am Private Gerard, student platoon leader of Platoon 3. The upcoming platoon match will depend on your abilities." Demian rested a hand on his hip and replied, "No worries at all." After returning to the room, Demian shouted seriously, "Attention, everyone." Kyle stood up and walked toward him, asking, "Demian, what's going on?" Demian's voice rang out as he explained, "In 1 week, there will be a platoon match between the units and we." He thought of that victory flag and declared that they must win first place at all costs. Demian clapped his hands forcefully, "And there is one thing you guys must remember, among the 3 teams we will face." He stretched out his hands and added, "We will completely crush Platoon 4 especially." Demian made a throat-slashing gesture with his thumb and warned, "The platoon leader of Platoon 4, we have to beat him up even worse. Is that clear?" Demian looked at the group gathered in front and thought, just entering the 2nd week of training, the atmosphere on the training ground has already completely changed. The instructor looked at the documents in his hand with a serious expression. "The goal of the military is to win the competition, and starting this week you will learn about battle formations, the most important thing during the match." He narrowed his eyes and looked down at the crowd, reminding them, "Even though this is a team competition, we will still be awarding extra points to individual soldiers who demonstrate excellent skills. So, do your best to show them off." The group shouted in unison, "Yes, sir." Demian couldn't help but contemplate. Extra points? That sounds good. Who in the training camp doesn't want high points so they can be assigned to the branch they like? The corners of his mouth curled into a happy smile. Well, I'll just try my best and see. Afterward, Lalan gestured in the air. Today, we will learn the triangular formation, an offensive formation specialized for piercing enemy lines. Demian thought, a triangular formation, huh? Information about it immediately popped into his head. This formation has extreme destructive power like a giant arrow. But its weakness is that if the spearhead collapses, the formation behind it will also fall apart. Demian looked at Kyle beside him. Even so, if the person leading is strong enough, it will create a destructive force. Luckily, my team already has a guy who is perfect for the spearhead. Immediately after, Lalan stood with his hands behind his back and announced, "Now, we will practice the triangular formation right away. Split into 2 groups and hurry up and form a triangle." Demian looked at the instructor and said to Kyle, "You go to that side, I'll command the formation here." Kyle scoffed, "I won't lose this time." He walked in front of the group and waved his hand. "All right, everyone, come here. I'll show you a tip about the triangular formation that the instructor just explained." Kristen asked with a suspicious expression, "What tip? Have you ever done this before?" Demian answered calmly, "My father used to be in the military, so I've learned about it." The whole group leaned in to listen as he began to explain. The guys on the other side will definitely form the exact same triangular formation the instructor talked about. And when they charge forward, Adrian clenched his fist and shouted, "That sounds awesome." Kristen also raised his fist and smiled brightly, "Let's try it out." Hearing this, Demian stood with his hands on his hips and yelled, "Those of you who are strong, stand right behind me, and the shorter guys hold your shields to protect the outer sides." He gripped his shield tightly, turned back and reminded them, "Remember to hold your shields high, at least up to your heads." The group replied in unison, "Understood." Demian looked toward the opposite side. They look like they're preparing their defense really well, but whatever they do will be useless. He concluded lightly, "I'll just pierce straight through." Afterward, he turned back and commanded, "Don't decrease your speed, let's settle this in one charge." Lalan waved his hand and commanded, "Match begins." The instructor's voice rang out, "Left foot." An excited roar rang out, "Left foot." The sound of noise rang out across the field. Demian looked over and smiled slightly, thinking, doing this for the first time, it's pretty good that they can hold that defensive stance. They're moving forward without breaking formation at all. He frowned tightly, "All right, I'm about to approach Kyle's formation." He then yelled loudly to urge them on, "Speed up, brothers." On the other side, Kyle's group marched in rhythm, constantly shouting, "Left." Purple light radiated from Demian's body. "Now it's my turn to make a move. When we were practicing endurance and stamina, I didn't even bother using mana." He silently thought to himself, "But in moments like this, I have to bring it out." He let out a shout. He used his shield to collide forcefully with Kyle's shield. Demian pressed hard on his shield and shouted excitedly, "Push hard, drill into the gap just like we planned." He calculated in his head, "If I target the opening instead of charging straight at him, the opponent will be confused for a second." At that exact moment, a voice shouted, "Someone stop him." Demian's eyes lit up as he stared toward the back. "Let me do it." He looked at the gap that had been created and yelled, "The opportunity is here." Immediately after, the long sticks from Demian's side simultaneously struck the knees of the people opposite them. Logan was knocked backward, startled. "What the hell is this?" Kyle turned his head to look at the group that was constantly falling and shouted, "What the hell are you guys doing? Get up." He turned his head toward this side and yelled, "Damn it, I'll deal with you first." Immediately after, Demian charged forward with his shield. "Kyle, have you forgotten that your opponent is me?" Kyle's expression darkened and he shouted coldly, "Move aside, Demian." Upon hearing this, he raised his shield to block and asked, "You're telling me to move aside?" He replied with a serious expression, "Yes." Right when he saw Demian beside him, he shouted, "Huh." Immediately after, he gently used his strength to shove, causing Kyle to fall. Demian looked down from above and said with a smile, "Kyle, your build is great, but you need to learn how to use your strength at the right time and place." Lalan stood in one spot, watching the battle situation. "That kid is much better than I thought." He stared intently at Demian's small frame. Looking at his build, it's nothing too outstanding. It's hard to believe he's in the same batch of rookies as the rest of them. Immediately after, Lalan spread his arms and announced, "Stop! The winning team in this practice match is Demian's team." Demian reached out to praise. "Well done, Kyle." Kyle grasped his hand, stood up and said, "Next time I will definitely beat you." Afterward, he asked, "But hey Demian, what strategy did you use?" the people behind Kyle also asked. Did you deliberately target our opening? How is anyone supposed to block that? The group surrounded him noisily. How about we use this move in the platoon matches, Demian? The sunset dyed the place in golden light. Demian looked toward Kyle and Logan, who were practicing nearby. These guys usually run away to the barracks as soon as training is over, but now they actually know how to reflect and practice with each other. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. This atmosphere is good. With this pace, I don't need to worry about the tournament anymore. Suddenly, a harsh sound rang out. That little brat is actually the squad leader of Squad 1. Demian let out a confused sound as he looked over. Hayden pointed toward this side and yelled, "Exactly, look at him standing there commanding training." Aston laughed mockingly. What's wrong with those people? Why on earth would they listen to a little brat as their boss? Logan looked over with a dark face. What did you say, you dogs? Little brat, Shivo also scolded unpleasantly. You bastards. Hayden spread his arms to continue provoking them. What? If you're a child, you get called a little brat. Is there something wrong with what I said? Aston laughed in agreement. You can just look and see how pathetic that squad's skill level is. Mason walked out from behind and laughed in contempt. Forget them. It's not the fault of the people following him, it's the fault of that guy who doesn't know his limits and acts cocky as a squad leader. Demian turned his head and saw him and couldn't help but scold. It's that guy again. Is he the type who just loves to get beaten up? Afterward, he shook his head. Forget it. Why bother getting tired and provoked by a piece of trash? Anyway, I'll just crush him in the tournament. He then commanded calmly, Squad 1 dismissed to the barracks. Suddenly, a voice shouted, "What kind of tone are you using, you bastards?" Demian looked up and was startled by the scene before him. Logan's group rushed forward with furious expressions, shouting noisily, "If you meet my squad in the tournament, you guys are dead, you bastards, just wait and see until we come and crush you." Kyle pointed at Mason and declared excitedly, "Especially you, the squinty-eyed guy in the front, you guys better go prepare your coffins first." Afterward, he was fuming with rage, turned back and asked, "Hey Demian, those bastards you just insulted are from Platoon 4, right?" He was startled and confirmed, "Huh, oh yeah, that's right." Kyle and the others stared at the group and slammed their fists together. Those bastards, we absolutely have to beat them to a pulp. Immediately after, the group started shouting excitedly, "Even though it's a break today, let's keep practicing. When we face Platoon 4, I'm going to wipe the floor with their faces." Demian looked toward them and mused, I didn't expect these guys to be this easily provoked, but who knows. He couldn't help but flash a bright smile. This might actually turn out to be easy. That evening inside Morris's office, he crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, asking, "Have you seen anyone promising among the rookies this time?" Rabin reported seriously, "Yes, sir, there are a few with potential, but two in particular really stand out." Morris immediately picked up the documents to read. "They're both quite young, aren't they? Is there anything special about them?" Rabin explained, "I'm not sure, but it seems like they already know how to control mana." He was startled and asked again, "Mana, do those two rookies have any family background?" Rabin stood at attention and replied, "It doesn't seem like there's anything special about them, sir." Morris looked down, silently calculating. Most people who register for the training camp are commoners. Mana training methods cost a fortune to learn, so for commoners, mana is like a mystical, distant power. He stared at their information and muttered, "Rookie Demian enlisted after losing both his parents, and Rookie Appel's background is just as normal. It's because it's too normal that it makes me suspicious." Immediately after, Morris looked up and asked, "Oh, and tell me, I heard there was some friction between the platoons earlier?" Rabin closed his eyes and reported, "Yes, sir. Actually, that commotion involved Rookie Demian." He thought of the group Mason provoking them and explained, "It's because Demian is too young to be a student platoon leader." Rabin remembered Logan's group and added, "So the other student platoon leaders and team members looked down on him, but the people in Platoon 1 were furious, which actually made the whole team united." Morris couldn't help but verify, "You mean the people in Platoon 1 have already accepted that kid as their leader?" Rabin bowed his head and confirmed, "Yes, sir, that's correct." Morris rested his chin on his hand and exclaimed, "Interesting." He raised a finger and gestured, "If that's the case, how about we try this?" He leaned forward to listen to Morris's entire plan. After listening, Rabin was startled and asked, "But don't you think doing that might backfire?" He rested his head on his hand and smiled slightly. "If so, then it just proves that their ability is only at that level." Morris thought of Kyle's group and added, "And if their solidarity is strong enough, trying it once is worth it. So then." His eyes flashed with a deep blue light as he declared, Increase the training intensity for Platoon 1 and Platoon 4, the ones who just fought with each other, to the maximum for me. Kyle's group was suddenly startled and turned their heads at the same time. What's going on? Why do I suddenly have goosebumps all over my body? Inside the room, someone lying on the bed shouted, "We're done for. Why are they suddenly increasing our training hours?" The person next to him replied, "I heard it's only our platoon and Platoon 4 that have to train extra as a punishment." Remembering today's training, Carter gritted his teeth and complained, "They said we have to do crawling drills on top of everything else." Another soldier added irritably, "Isn't it a bit excessive to give us this punishment just for cursing a few times?" Kyle glanced back and asked Demian, "Is this even fair?" He silently pondered the question, "Crawling drills, huh?" Demian closed his eyes, thinking to himself that he already knew their intentions, then replied, "Well, whether it's fair or not, what else can we do?" He stood up and walked toward the group, asking, "Did you guys think you were on vacation?" Demian turned to look at the group and pressed, "These crawling drills will definitely make our bodies ache a lot more, but if we get through it, our stamina will blow the other platoons out of the water. Everyone understands the true purpose of this exercise now, right?" Shivo raised an eyebrow and muttered to himself, "Damn, even that kid can figure that out." Another soldier couldn't help but think, "If I complain here, I'm basically losing to a 13-year-old kid." Demian closed his eyes, laughed, and added, "It'll probably hurt a bit the first time, but I've got your backs, so give it everything you've got." Afterward, another man complained, dissatisfied, "But they aren't actually going to make us crawl on that gravel-filled field, are they?" He looked up and asked, "What, you want them to lay out soft cushions for you to lie on?" Kyle looked shocked and asked, "Say, Demian, you sound like you've done this a lot." He closed his eyes and thought to himself, "I've been doing this my whole life, of course." In his mind, Demian thought about how many times in his previous life he had to crawl flat on the ground just to keep his life. Immediately after, he silently sighed, "But that's not the real meaning of crawling drills." Demian couldn't help but think about how grueling it was to be forced to crawl after a workout that already left them exhausted, with bodies full of scrapes and bruises. One soldier grabbed another by the collar and shouted, "What the hell did you just bark, you dog?" Demian silently pondered, "Everyone's temper is going to flare up and the platoon is bound to start bickering internally." He looked at the group and thought, "Overcoming the pressure created by this exercise, that is the true purpose of adding this drill. They just want to see which side, Platoon 1 or Platoon 4, can handle the heat better." Demian squatted down by his bed and pulled out a crate. Since the motive was already so obvious, there was no way he was going to sit still and take it, so he called out loudly, "Guys, drag out everything they issued you." Darian asked suspiciously, "Everything? Why on earth are you dragging out all our socks?" He replied, "From now on." Demian smiled brightly and pulled strongly on the socks in his hand. "I'm going to perform a magic trick that will serve as our lucky charm for this drill." The next morning, the trainer stared down at them and asked, "Has Platoon 1 finished assembling yet?" The voices of Demian's group rang out, "Yes, trainer." He looked down and introduced, "All right, I'm Nielsen, the trainer in charge of your crawling drills. Today we will learn the low crawl technique. Teaching assistants, take your positions." Nielsen clasped his hands behind his back and watched the captain in front demonstrate. "For a low crawl, you must lie flat against the ground, keep your spear straight, and move as quickly as possible by crossing your arms and knees." Then he pointed at the nets ahead and asked, "Now you will cross that obstacle course using this low crawl technique. Are you ready?" Platoon 1 shouted excitedly, "Ready, trainer." Nielsen saw this and secretly marveled, "At least this bunch still has some spirit, unlike that Platoon 4 lot." He looked very serious and loudly commanded, "Group 1, start clearing the obstacle course for me. Move out." Platoon 1 simultaneously hit the ground and crawled rapidly under the nets. Nielsen closed his eyes and thought suspiciously, "They're starting crawling drills in only the second week when it usually isn't until the fourth. What the hell is the company commander planning?" He looked up at the group and lamented, "Crawling on this kind of terrain isn't just about regular exhaustion, it's painful. They're bound to struggle and trip over themselves constantly." Suddenly, Nielsen's eyes widened, startled by the sight before him. He watched the group nearing the finish line and asked in bewilderment, "What the hell? With what kind of crazy speed are these guys clearing the obstacles?" Nielsen's face sank. "What the hell? It's clearly their first time practicing crawling." A figure appeared from behind, report trainer. That person asked suspiciously, "When is Group 2's turn?" Nielsen, startled, pointed toward that side and ordered Group 2 move out. The group of Platoon 1 rushed excitedly toward the wire nets. Nielsen looked back and forth between the two sides, unable to help whispering in his heart, "What the hell is wrong with this bunch? They look like a pack of starving berserkers." Demian hugged his head and smiled. "I bet the teacher didn't expect us to be this smooth on day one. This is definitely the first time he's ever had a class like this." Kyle crawled out looking excited. "Demian, you're the best." Another person also excitedly shouted, "I even had to pretend to look tired and in pain earlier." That person rolled up his sleeves and shouted, "The terrain was a bit painful, but this trick was a total lifesaver." Darian praised excitedly, cutting the socks to make elbow and knee pads. "Demian, you're a genius." Immediately after, Nielsen's voice announced, "Platoon 1's crawling drill is complete. Everyone disperse and head back to the barracks." Kyle looked over and asked, "Say, Demian, where did you learn this trick?" Demian didn't turn his head and said, "From my late father." But it came with a warning. He asked, "What is it?" He smiled faintly and answered, "Absolutely do not let the trainer catch you." In his head, Demian remembered the trainer's furious face. "You little brats, you've got a lot of nerve-pulling tricks right in front of me. Everyone down, give me 100 laps of low crawls around the training field immediately." Kyle laughed and patted his head hard. "A genius indeed, you just mentioned it and now it's happening." Demian turned to look back, thinking, why does this guy always hit so hard? Is he holding a grudge or something? He looked at the nearby weapons and pondered, anyway, now all that's left is the shield and spear drill, right? Finally, I get to learn the kingdom's best spear technique. Demian recalled the image and mused, the kingdom's best spear technique. Stupid people will look down on it compared to the prestigious techniques of noble families, but if you train it to the highest level, it's a top-tier technique that doesn't lose to any school. He remembered his previous life circumstances. The problem is that most people stop after learning the basics. In my past life, this spear technique was my only turning point. Demian recalled that figure. I practiced it until I was half dead. Only then did I achieve some decent results, and I only truly broke through after meeting my master. His lips curled into a smile. Master, I wonder if that old man is still as eccentric as he used to be. Surely, we'll meet again eventually. Across from them, the Platoon 4 group was loudly complaining, this is so exhausting, crawling on this sharp gravel. Have they lost their minds? Kyle looked up and said, looks like Platoon 4 just finished their practice too. But those guys. Mason roared with fury, can you guys shut your mouths? Stop whining for God's sake. Demian and Kyle were both surprised to hear that. The surrounding Platoon 4 members shouted back dissatisfied. What did you say? What are you barking about? Do you think being a platoon leader makes you so special that you can act like our boss? As if you're some veteran leader. Carter saw that and laughed. Over there, it's so tense it's like they're about to start a fight. Logan followed up, if we didn't have these pads, we'd probably be bickering like that too, huh? Kyle draped an arm over his shoulder and laughed loudly, we're so lucky, Demian's pads are a total lifesaver. Mason looked up with fury, those bastards, they're still in the mood to laugh over there. Hayden also complained, they clearly practiced crawling just like us, so how come they still look perfectly fine? Mason roared with fury, I bet they cheated again. If it weren't for them from the start, we wouldn't have been punished with crawling drills. He clenched his fists, you bastards, he determined. There are only a few days left until the platoon competition. By then, I'll crush every single one of you. Mason looked fierce as he vowed to snatch the top spot. Demian faced him calmly. Time passed by extremely quickly. And finally, the day of the interplatoon competition arrived. The trainer stared at the people below and asked, are all 4 platoons fully assembled? They all shouted in unison, yes, trainer. His voice continued, I will call out the platoons according to the competition bracket. Everyone, get ready. Kyle turned his head and shouted, Demian. He looked back, what is it? He frowned and looked at Demian, you look different today, or am I just imagining things? Kyle continued, something definitely changed, but I can't put my finger on it. Did you get taller? You're at the age where you're growing, aren't you? Logan laughed from behind, oh Kyle, Demian was already tall to begin with. Another person added, yeah, it's just because you're unreasonably bulky. Stop teasing him. Demian glanced in that direction, thinking angrily, does this guy feel it instinctively or what? In his head, he recalled last night. Actually, last night I broke through to the second stage of the mana cultivation method. Thanks to that, my mana reserves have increased significantly. Demian thought about the purple light that covered him. Since entering this training camp, practicing mana every day has finally paid off. Immediately after, he called out loudly, making him look over Kyle. Demian said seriously, "In this platoon competition, I want our platoon to win completely and decisively." In his head, he thought about the opportunity. The top 5 best soldiers in the tournament will be rewarded with the choice of any equipment they like from the armory. Demian lowered his head in deep thought. Usually people choose weapons or armor with disposable defensive magic, but those are only rank C at best. He clenched his fists, thinking about a ring that emitted a mother-of-pearl glow. That's not my goal. In my past life, a subordinate at Training Camp 3 told me. Demian stared at it thinking, there's a ring that possesses a very special, extremely powerful ability. It's an item with a continuous activation effect, so it's at least rank A or higher. He gently clenched his fist thinking, to get it into my hands, I must win this tournament and take first prize. If Appel knows how to use mana and gets to choose first, he might just snatch it from me. Afterward, he looked up and asked, "Do you think we can do it?" Kyle laughed and confirmed, "Of course we can." Then he clapped his hands together hard. Kyle looked at the people below and asked, "Did you hear that, guys? The platoon leader said we're going to crush this tournament. You heard him clearly, right?" They were filled with fighting spirit and shouted excitedly, "That's right, the first prize is definitely ours." Kyle turned around and said, "Looks like everyone is on the same page." Demian closed his eyes and smiled. "Great." Right then, the trainer's voice announced, "Now I announce the schedule for the first match of the inter-platoon tournament. Platoon 1, step forward." Demian took the lead, laughing, "Let's march straight toward the pinnacle of glory, guys." Right after the platoons stepped forward to present themselves, the trainer loudly announced every detail. The platoon tournament is divided into 2 sides, one attacking and one defending. After 1 round, we switch sides. We'll play a total of 2 practice rounds. The faces of the recruits all turned serious as the words rang out. The attacking side that fails to capture the flag within the allotted time will be disqualified. Platoon 2. And of course, Demian and the recruits of Platoon 1 had no objections to the trainer's following order. Prepare to attack first. After hearing the instructions, he turned directly to face his subordinates and emphasized every word, "Just do exactly what we practiced." They replied in unison, "Yes, sir." Receiving a satisfying answer, Demian scanned the strongest recruits in the ranks. "Kyle, you haven't forgotten the plan, have you? When you hear my signal, just charge straight into the guys in front with everything you've got." He guaranteed happily, "Don't worry about it. As far as brute strength goes, I'm very confident." And waiting until both sides had set up their formations, the trainer immediately shouted with the loudest volume, "The match begins." As the attacking side, Platoon 2 naturally charged forward in a triangle formation at top speed. Crush them. Shivo's group clenched their wooden shields to withstand the incoming pressure while not forgetting to say, "Hold your positions, everyone. Don't let the formation break." Platoon 2 personally encountered difficulties in their assault, leaving the whole group in disbelief. "What the hell is wrong with these guys? There isn't a single gap. They look like a solid fortress wall." Observing from the high platform, the trainers couldn't help but comment. "So Platoon 2 is attacking first, but Platoon 1's formation looks a bit weird, right? Setting up a formation that dense just means standing there and taking the beating. What can they do?" Unexpectedly, at the very next moment, a mutation occurred when a harsh roar echoed through the space, drawing Lalan's attention. "Push forward." It turned out the source of that sound was none other than Kyle, who was excitedly overwhelming the group of opponents. Everyone on Platoon 2's side was extremely panicked. "Our side is being pushed back." Alex, in his role as the flag bearer, gritted his teeth and relayed an order that was almost meaningless to his subordinates, who were being pushed by the enemy to the point where they couldn't even lift their heads. "Hold firm." I said, "Hold firm." Thin legs clenched tightly with every roar. "These bastards, our side is the attackers. Just shut up and defend." But at the moment after that, Demian, standing in a position to observe the whole situation, just shouted one word, "Kyle." No long-winded instructions were needed. That was enough to activate the frenzy within him. "This time, I'm going all out." Facing the terrifying momentum from the opponent, the morale of the entire Platoon 2 fell into the abyss. "What the hell? What kind of monster is that guy? He doesn't even bother using his shield. He's slamming us straight with his shoulder." And because of this excessive charge, Demian's teammates were forced to speed up toward their leader. Kyle immediately urged, "Stand next to me." At the very next moment, even though Platoon 1 was the defending side, they became the attackers as Kyle decisively charged into the enemy's formation, pushing through. Facing this terrifying scene, even Alex turned pale and gritted his teeth. How are they coordinating so perfectly? They clearly trained for the same amount of time as us. With sharp eyes, Demian quickly captured every moment, loudly ordering, "There's an opening, Platoon 1, all-out attack." Without any rest, a new wave of attacks took place, so ferociously that white smoke flew across the vast space. Witnessing the whole situation unfolding in an unbelievable trend, Lalen couldn't help but stutter as he turned to Brian, who was in charge of their group. "What is this? Platoon 1 leader, are you making them practice overtime?" After a long hesitation, he responded, "I'm surprised too." Deep down, fear surged with sweat rolling down his cheek. "I never expected them to show such excellent performance while only learning the basics. This level is no different from elite soldiers trained intensively." He turned his eyes toward the quiet figure behind the bustling army. "And the reason they can do this is, of course, thanks to that kid." Now, Demian, in Brian's eyes, was showing his decisiveness as he issued appropriate orders. "Spread out to both sides to make room. This match, we're going to shatter Platoon 2's formation." Memories of when he caught them practicing reappeared in his mind. Platoon 1 volunteers to stay behind to practice every day after class, and Demian stands up to fix their weak points. No wonder they're reaping the rewards now. Meanwhile, every member of his team was showing determination and applying what he had taught them. "Raise your shields, don't let them drop below your shoulders. Just do exactly what Demian told you." Seeing the results unfolding positively, Brian couldn't control his surging excitement. "At first, I was worried that a kid being a student platoon leader wouldn't work out, but he has proven it with his own practical ability." At the moment he saw Alex in his sights, Demian decisively shouted, "Kyle, right now." The mental connection reached the extreme, and just a few words were enough for him to understand his intention. "Where's the flag?" Grinning to show white teeth, Alex jumped in fear when he discovered, "I found you." Now, surging panic made Alex confused to the point where sweat was covering his body. "Stop that guy, forget about attacking, just focus on stopping him." Contrary to the near-total loss of morale on Platoon 2's side, Platoon 1 was still burning with terrifying energy. "Not yet, guys, assemble." Amidst the dense white smoke, Kyle still calmly broke into an excited smile. "You fools!" The opponents were all stunned. "What? Why did that guy who is strong as a buffalo suddenly stand still?" The excitement on his lips never faded. "You guys have walked right into our trap," successfully causing significant panic among the leaders. A trap. While they were still startled by the announcement from the opponent, a figure kicked the ground hard and rushed forward like the wind. With the small feet characteristic of a 13-year-old, that person was none other than Demian, possessing a flexible body. "Well done, Kyle." He launched his small body into the air, his sharp eyes focused on exactly one target. Before Alex could react, the end of the stick in Demian's hand thrust straight into the middle of his opponent's chest, with such intensity that it knocked him down onto the rough ground. At the moment he burst into a cry of pain, the trainer also spoke up, "Time up." Since the attacking side, Platoon 2, failed to capture the flag. Directly stepping on his opponent to strike a pose, Demian held the red flag high and continued with an energetic declaration. "We won." And naturally, after a grueling match, the blue-haired trainer wouldn't forget to give credit, take a short break and then switch sides. Those behind couldn't help but exclaim, "Truly amazing." At this rate, Platoon 1 might just sweep this tournament with an overwhelming winning streak. However, someone decisively countered, "No, it's not that certain yet." A finger wrapped in a red uniform glove pointed straight ahead. "Look over there," with that level. Now, the two remaining teams were still in a fierce battle. According to his assessment, wouldn't that be a worthy opponent for Platoon 1? Possessing a surge of anger no different from a volcanic eruption, a recruit stomped the ground frantically. Damn it all, to hell with this." It turned out it was a platoon leader who was observing the situation gradually turning against him. "Platoon 3, our first opponent. I only plan to treat this match as a warm-up before going over to crush Platoon 1. With Hayden lying in the shield-bearing squad, it was clear the person lost in furious thought was none other than Mason. "Why are these guys standing perfectly still and not moving an inch? We lost miserably on the defensive round. If we lose this one too." Finally, unable to suppress the anger building in his gut, he roared with meaningless words, "What the hell are you guys doing? Did you forget the plan? Do exactly what I told you." Sure enough, at the next moment he received a wave of challenging reproach from his subordinates. If you're so good, come in and do it yourself. What kind of platoon leader are you, only good at hiding behind people and bragging? Mason's mind went crazy. Damn it, the coordination is awful and no one has any motivation at all. Simultaneously, on Platoon 3's side, Gerard, as the leader, calmly raised an issue with the youth beside him. Appel, those guys on the other side look exhausted. Shall we charge and pierce their formation? He shook his head decisively while replying, no need. At the next moment, he calmly laid out his plan with blue eyes clearly showing confidence. Just hold our positions and aim for their shield bearers. If we drag this out, they'll crumble on their own. For those words from his opponent, he nodded in acceptance without any rebuttal, even though the boy was clearly younger than him. Works for me, let's do it. His mind was racing. I didn't expect Appel, a kid who just turned 14, to grasp the situation and the enemy's weaknesses so quickly. With his own sharp eyes, Gerard quickly had a series of questions about the other person's background. We've only met for 2 weeks, but I'm really curious about his family background. This kid is clearly a commoner, he definitely couldn't. But without letting this bother the situation for too long, he decisively deployed the necessary instructions. Everyone, put all the pressure on those shield bearers. Maintain formation and hold your positions. Thus, another terrifying collision occurred with neither side willing to yield. Hayden, as the leader, shouted loudly and provocatively with his brows furrowed. You bastards, if you're brave enough, come in and fight. Stop playing those cowardly stalling games. But just by shouting, Gerard gained a clear assessment of the situation. Platoon 4's strength and morale have hit rock bottom. The best case scenario is that they lose their patience and charge in on their own. Contrary to what he expected, Hayden, who was shouting just a second ago, was so exhausted he was foaming at the mouth. I can't take it anymore. Regardless, the signal had arrived, and Gerard decisively shouted his command to the members in front. Platoon 3, our chance is here. The whole group immediately braced themselves to rush in and shatter Platoon 4's defensive position with all their might and powerful roars. Regardless of how exhausted they were, Hayden's group still tried to use their whole bodies to hold their positions. Don't fall if the shield bearers fall. Unfortunately, things couldn't be handled so easily when Gerard turned his head and called out Appel's name. Just waiting for that, the other person rushed forward toward the layered shields as soon as he finished his sentence. He stepped on them without hesitation. This was clearly a springboard designed specifically for this situation. Sure enough, at the moment after, Appel sprang straight up high, similar to what Demian had done a few minutes earlier. Possessing terrifying mana, he didn't waste it and concentrated it on the stick in his hand. With the strength of only one person, Appel easily made Platoon 4 collapse in a stunning manner. Witnessing this scene from a relatively safe distance, Mason was so horrified that his brows knitted together. What the hell are you idiots doing? His mind couldn't even forget the bet he'd made with Demian. Damn it, if they fight like this, how are they ever going to beat Platoon 1? And at that exact moment, from the corner of his eye, he caught sight of the boy's relaxed figure. Watching the unremarkable display from a distance, the boy sighed, "It's over." Sure enough, the instructor's voice rang out immediately afterward, "Sparring match over, Platoon 3 wins." Watching the people being cheered on under the clear blue sky, Demian instantly reached a conclusion. That guy Appel is no joke. He's going to be a tough opponent. He turned away decisively, his mind shifting gears. In the end, the real battle will be against Platoon 3. A surge of upgraded mana flared up within him and the corners of his mouth curled into an excited arc. I'm actually looking forward to this. See you in the finals, Appel. After a short rest following the intense battle the platoons had just endured, the instructor stood up to announce, "Break time is over. All platoons assemble at the training ground immediately." As they moved forward, Kyle didn't forget to confirm the plan with the person beside him. "Hey Demian, we're crushing Platoon 4 in this match, right?" He just replied with a bored, calm expression. "That's right, this is their last chance. You can bet they're going to struggle to earn at least 1 point of honor." Meanwhile, Kyle puffed out his chest, a grin stretching from ear to ear. "Now that's what I'm talking about. I'm going to smash the mouth of that guy who dared to call you a brat." Demian nonchalantly dismissed him. "I've already called dibs on that guy, just clear the path for me, Kyle." Facing his comrades under his command, he didn't show the slightest hesitation as he listed the opponent's weaknesses. All right, the enemy is exhausted and their coordination is trash anyway. Radiating an evil aura that made even the clear blue sky seem to yield, Demian emphasized every single word. but I have no intention of going easy on them. In fact, we need to strike faster and hit harder. We have to completely crush them in this match." The moment the last word left his lips, Kyle's group erupted with excitement and loud laughter. "I've been waiting for this moment. They need to pay for running their mouths." Waiting until everyone finished their enthusiastic shouting, he, as the team leader, immediately turned stern and gave his instructions. "We're going to end this quickly, so everyone stay focused." No one had any objections. Even Logan's group kept their grins wide as they responded. Understood loud and clear. And then, at that very moment, the entire Platoon 1 team got into formation, each of them burning with spirit and stern expressions on their faces. In stark contrast to them were the soldiers of Platoon 4, who were filled with trepidation after having just lost quite miserably to Platoon 3. While clearly drawing a line between the two groups of soldiers, Demian, as the one in charge, maintained a confident demeanor. Meanwhile, Mason was acting as irritable as if the boy owed him money. Under the instructor's voice, the order came: "Match start." Carrying the intimidating momentum of Platoon 1, they took the initiative to attack with a deafening shout. "Let's go, brothers." Not long after, both sides closed the distance. "Keep the formation steady while we charge." In contrast to watching Platoon 2 from the rear, Demian could now directly witness Platoon 4's execution and plan accordingly. "This Platoon 4's formation looks much looser than I thought. At this level, if we just ram straight into them, their line will shatter." And then, his mouth curled into a 45-degree angle, overflowing with confidence as he prepared himself. "But it has to be done thoroughly and perfectly. I'm going to crush them to pieces so that from now on, no one will dare to run their mouths again." Possessing absolute coordination, thanks to the release of power, Demian shoved the biggest guy in their group, Kyle, forcefully forward. With the strength combined from just two people, a fierce collision took place between the two opposing sides. And clearly, Platoon 4 was struck by no small shock from the brutal gust of wind Demian himself had just created. What the hell is this? What kind of monster strength is this? As the one always standing in the safest position, Mason understood nothing except to scream out of mounting panic. "What are those idiots doing? Tighten your asses and hold the defensive line, you useless bastards." By now, sweat was pouring off him like a late autumn rain shower. Shield team, protect the flag, block their direct attack, and the spear team. Unfortunately, just as he was running his mouth, both Kyle and Demian repeated the same move they had demonstrated while sparring with Platoon 2. In a split second, Mason could only jump in terror at the sight of the boy hovering in the wide, open air. "I told you I'd remember your face, didn't I? It's you." His jaw clamped shut. A sense of impending danger washed over Mason so intensely that he couldn't think of how to react beyond just standing there. There wasn't the slightest surprise. His right arm was neatly crippled by the boy. By the time Demian landed lightly on the ground, Mason was already slumped over, clutching his painful shoulder. However, the rage overwhelming his reason made him forget his pain as he hissed every word through gritted teeth with deep hatred. "You bastard, don't look down on people too much." It was no wonder he harbored such deep resentment toward Demian. He didn't hesitate for a second as he picked up the wooden stick he had dropped. "Do you take me for a straw scarecrow?" And then, at the next moment, Mason charged forward as if the boy's previous kick meant nothing. "In a fair one-on-one fight, a piece of trash like you wouldn't be worth a rusted nail." Demian sighed with boredom. To someone tempered through countless battles like him, the attack was pathetic. He had already predicted it. He didn't even bother wasting more time, decisively grabbing the tip of the opponent's stick. "Is this really all you've got?" It was clear that Mason's strength wasn't enough to hold onto even a sliver of the wood. Having tossed his shield away, the boy nonchalantly performed a beautiful display of staffwork. "You lost your weapon just like that?" In the next moment, he didn't hesitate at all to deliver another strike directly onto the injury he had already kicked earlier. Stomping on the enemy in a cool, imposing manner filled with killing intent, mana poured out of Demian with every word. "Dropping your weapon on the battlefield is no different than kneeling and begging to be killed, you idiot." He didn't stop at mere intimidation. His fist clenched tightly, gathering mana. "Keep today etched in your heart because this is useful advice for your life later on." Without giving his opponent a chance to counter, a heavy fist landed squarely on Mason's face as Demian snapped, "Get it." Witnessing this terrifying scene, the instructor finally couldn't sit still and rushed over. "Platoon 4 leader, are you all right?" As for the boy, he sighed again. He didn't know how many times today. It was too easy. I'm bored of even talking about it. Meanwhile, the instructor personally experienced Demian's sharp, imposing gaze and hesitated as he spoke. Platoon 4 is no longer capable of continuing the match. At this moment, Demian was picking up a wooden stick while the instructor continued. Therefore, the winner of this match. There was nothing left to debate. He raised the blue flag high under the instructor's declaration of victory for Platoon 1. Despite having just endured a slightly grueling match, Kyle was still full of energy as he laughed heartily. That felt amazing. The other rookies were just as happy. Demian is something else, he's seriously top tier. Watching Mason being carried away on a stretcher by two people, the members of Platoon 4 were truly terrified. Didn't they say that platoon leader of Platoon 1 is only 13? How can his level be so overpowered? Observing from the high platform, someone finally couldn't hold back their awe. He's truly a natural-born genius. Nielsen became even more certain as he evaluated him. He might even be on a higher level than us instructors. Rudolph beside him also couldn't help but laugh while nodding in agreement. I can't even argue with that. Suddenly, a larger figure appeared nearby and posed a question. What's got you guys so worked up? This scene successfully drew both his attention and confusion. Facing them was none other than Leonhard Belkullen, the chief instructor of the kingdom's 3rd division. Seeing clearly who had arrived, no one dared to delay as they stood straight and saluted. Salute, glory to the kingdom. Without bothering to acknowledge them, Leonhard went straight to the main subject now in his line of sight. Brian, is that the kid you were telling me about? Directing his gaze toward Demian, who was being lifted up by Platoon 1 after his overwhelming victory, he nodded in confirmation to his superior. Yes, that's him, sir. The corners of his mouth curled into an intrigued arc and Leonhard slowly enunciated every word. Looks like an interesting factor has just appeared. And then time passed and the rookies went back to their quarters. A young man suddenly burst into Platoon 1's bedroom and shouted, "Oh my God." While chatting with his comrades, Demian had to turn and ask in response to Shivo's panic. "What's all the commotion about?" he quickly reported. "I think some big shot just visited our training camp." Recalling the scene he had accidentally witnessed, Shivo was still startled. "I heard it's a super famous instructor from the 3rd division. That guy is already a legend in the instructor world. No wonder our instructors looked so stunned, like they'd lost their minds." Hearing the special mention, the boy immediately stood up and asked a logical question. "An instructor from the 3rd division? What's his name?" Rubbing his head, the man tried to recall as he answered, "I just heard it, but it suddenly slipped my mind. His name is..." Both Demian's body and spirit entered a state of shock at the next word from the other. "Leonhard, something, I think." So in the next moment, he corrected the name that had been circling in his brain precisely. Leonhard. Sure enough, Shivo nodded when he mentioned it. "That's right, that's the name, Leonhard." Before he could finish, the boy rushed past him, making him ask in confusion, "Demian, where are you going?" Running straight down the hallway, the sullen yet urgent appearance of the student platoon leader left Shivo deep in confusion. What the hell is wrong with him all of a sudden? Meanwhile, he didn't care about anything around him and only focused on the essential information moving in his mind. I have to check for myself if it's really him. He never expected that just as Demian wanted to find out for sure, Leonhard had gradually closed the distance with him from the other direction. His presence naturally drew the man's attention. "Isn't that rookie Demian from earlier?" Brian saw this and became joyful as he expressed, "Demian, I was just about to look for you." He never expected that in the next moment the boy would close the distance with them and stand straight to salute with the most precise form. Glory to the kingdom. Facing this greeting from the other side, Leonhard calmly confirmed, "Your name is Demian, right?" Naturally, since it was his own name, he didn't hesitate to admit, "Yes, that's me." The atmosphere suddenly sank into silence as the boy lost himself in thought. The 3rd division has ties to Training Camp 3, but that place is so far away, I thought it would take a long time to meet him. Whatever happened, the degree of happiness in Demian upon meeting the person closest to him in his previous life was immeasurable. "Long time no see, the person who had the biggest influence on my life, master." In the long hallway, having just seen Demian respectfully salute, Leonhard confirmed the information again. "You're Demian, right?" On the outside, he maintained a composed expression, but in his heart, interest had already been stirred. "Old Rabin keeps praising the kid, so I had to come and see for myself." Sensing the flow of mana in the opponent's body, he inwardly admired. He's practicing a top-tier mana circulation method, huh? While stroking his chin in thought and evaluating the teenager before him from head to toe, Leonhardt suddenly spoke. I was watching earlier. Your spear technique is quite impressive too. Have you set your sights on any unit after graduation? Hearing that question, Demian drifted into thought for a moment. The unit I want to join. His lips parted several times as he organized his words. He didn't need to spend much time agonizing or considering it. He decisively declared with a face clearly showing excitement. I plan to join the Neocallis unit. The moment that concise answer rang out in the quiet atmosphere, it immediately startled Leonhardt. Are you serious? Because compared to other organizations, Neocallis is not to be trifled with, being one of the units belonging to the 3rd Division. Their mission is to suppress the monsters pouring out of the forest. That place is the most dangerous and harsh area. People lose their lives every year. Because he understood everything clearly, Leonhardt felt even more incredulous and curious about Demian's choice. Why on earth would you throw yourself into that place? Isn't it better to live comfortably as a royal administrative official? The boy looked straight at him and answered with unshakable resolve. Because only there can I grow stronger. Having received the boy's resolute answer, Leonhardt couldn't help but smile with interest. If you want, I can write a letter of recommendation for you to join the Knights. That squad. The words had barely echoed when Brian was stunned and hurriedly reminded him. Instructor, that place is reserved only for nobility. Standing before a door that countless people were willing to trade everything to touch, Demian refused. I am very grateful for your offer, but I have already decided. Because I have clearly defined my goal, there is someone there I must meet. I traveled all the way to this 3rd Division just to find that man. Seeing the resolve in every word and choice the boy made, Leonhardt didn't continue to try and persuade him. Since it's your decision, I won't stop you. Go get some rest. Before leaving, Brian still couldn't help but turn his head toward Demian to complain. You brat, do you know what kind of once-in-a-lifetime opportunity you just missed? The Knights usually only accept nobles, but a recommendation letter from the instructor is different. So he immediately turned to Leonhardt with a desperate expression to beg for a chance for the 13-year-old. Instructor, I think Demian is too young to realize what he just gave up. Let me go talk to him. But instead of agreeing, he suddenly opened his mouth. Do you really think the kid chose the wrong path? While he didn't know how to respond, he remembered the look in Demian's eyes when he declined the offer. I guess you haven't seen the look in his eyes just now. Saying this, he couldn't help but laugh with interest at the rare teenager. I don't know where the kid came from, but for 13 years old, his caliber is really something else. Carrying that thought, he spoke with a still satisfied expression on his face to stop him. Don't pressure him anymore, just let it be. As long as he's still in the 3rd Division, we'll definitely cross paths again. One day off passed, and the next morning was the match between Platoon 1 and Platoon 3. Demian looked toward the opposing group and reminded everyone, you saw it yesterday, Platoon 3 is not a pushover. Pausing for a beat to let everyone focus, he continued with a determined attitude. But I can guarantee one thing, by now there is no platoon in this training camp that can give us a hard time anymore. That confident declaration instantly boosted the team's morale. Kyle laughed gleefully. We're seriously strong, aren't we? After 2 overwhelming victories, the entire platoon was even more pumped. Demian curled his lips with determination. Let's crush them, just do what we always do. The moment the words were out, the instructor's resounding shout echoed throughout the open area. Platoon 3 will take the offense first. Match start. As soon as the signal rang out, Demian immediately raised his hand to signal. Gather up. In just a few short seconds, the whole team formed a tight defensive formation that caught Gerard by surprise. Isn't that the same formation they used against Platoon 4 yesterday? Appel observed intently and remarked, I have to admit that looks really solid. Seeing the wall of people Platoon 1 had just built, he narrowed his eyes and calculated before emphasizing every word. Appel, you have an extremely important role in this match. You know what to do, right? Without needing any further explanation, he nodded. Yes. Under his coordination, the members of Platoon 3 moved simultaneously and linked up in solid layers. Charge. The order was given, and both sides fell into a fierce clash. With his brows knitted tightly, he immediately adjusted the strategy. Everyone charge. Observing the familiar maneuvering, Gerard just frowned slightly as he realized it was the same old trick from yesterday. In that tense moment, he suddenly shouted clearly, Appel right now. The signal was given, and those standing in the front line immediately split to the sides. opening a wide corridor in the middle of the formation. That sudden change made Demian freeze, his gaze locked onto the gap that had just appeared. What? Are they breaking their own formation? What kind of trick are they playing? Unlike the need for a launcher like yesterday, this time, Appel immediately dashed forward, sprinting through the open path. Within just a few breaths, he had closed the distance and swung his spear at a member of the opposing team. The events happened too fast, leaving even Demian, who had the situation firmly in hand, momentarily stunned. Realizing the plan had taken effect, Gerard immediately seized the opportunity. Appel's strike hit, deepened the gap. At that very moment, Kyle, possessing a strong physique, knelt down with two shields in a ready stance. Do you think I'll let you get away with this? The shockwave that was full of momentum was forced to a halt by him alone, causing them extreme panic. What the hell kind of monster strength is this? Standing behind the front line, Demian inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. Given the sudden turn of events, I'm glad Kyle blocked that dangerous move just now. Recalling the scene, he couldn't help but admire inwardly. But that kid Appel is seriously top tier. One punch sent the shield bearer flying. Meanwhile, Appel on the other side of the lineup observed Kyle and sighed. What kind of monster is that? He's clearly from the north, so what is he doing digging around in training camp 3? He quickly brushed the thought aside, because there was a much more concerning problem ahead. Whatever the reason, this is getting annoying. That musclehead has locked onto me. Suddenly, the conversation Kyle and Demian had before the match flashed through his mind. Kyle, your only job is to lock down that guy Appel for me. As long as you can block him, no one will be able to break our formation. Upon hearing the name, he was confused. Who is Appel? The boy smiled meaningfully. You'll recognize him the second you see him. Back to the match, Kyle was still standing tall in front of the line like a wall, grinning with self-importance. Let's see what you guys are made of. Seeing the obstacle in front that still showed no signs of shaking, Gerard slowly stepped forward and asked, Appel, can you break through? Though he knew this wasn't an easy opponent to deal with, he didn't intend to back down. I have to, at all costs. Sensing the pressure from the opponent, Appel immediately scanned the entire plan in his head to find a way to break through. Using pure brute force isn't going to work on this guy. If that's the case, he slowly closed his eyes and poured all his strength into the spear in his hand. There is only one way. In the next moment, he suddenly shouted and launched himself into the air toward Kyle. The weapon struck down with incredible force, but he managed to raise his shield just in time to block it. His teammates standing behind immediately cheered with excitement. He blocked it, Kyle is the best. But they never expected the corners of Appel's mouth to curl up meaningfully. Fine, if you want to block, go ahead. The thought flashed and he pushed the spear with even more force, fueled by mana. Then I'll just keep hitting until you shatter. Clamping his teeth to endure each strike that felt like a sledgehammer, Kyle couldn't help but be incredulous. Damn it, how is a kid the same age as Demian this insanely strong? He had barely finished his thought when the shield in his hand couldn't take it anymore and shattered. Damn it all. Pulling the spear back, Appel poured all his remaining strength into the final blow. Let's end this here. With nothing left to block with, Kyle could only put his hands in front of him and prepare to meet the incoming attack. But just at the moment when victory and defeat were only inches apart, a figure suddenly dashed out from the side. Demian appeared just in time, using a mana-infused shield to block Appel's strike. When he realized who was standing before him, the boy couldn't help but be surprised as he called the opponent's name, Demian. Just as a new confrontation was about to erupt, a signal suddenly echoed through the air. The sound made everyone stop and turn their attention toward the source. Standing in the middle of the field, the instructor quickly announced the result. Time's up. Since the offense, Platoon 3 did not capture the flag before the allotted time, Platoon 3 loses. Hearing the verdict, Appel clenched his fist until it was stiff with regret. That brute actually blocked all my attacks. Damn it, I thought I could finish this quickly. On the other side, Demian directed his gaze toward his friend who was still breathing heavily after the defensive display and asked, Kyle, are you all right? He replied slowly and toughly, Of course I'm fine. The boy paused for a beat, then made a decision, sit out the second round and rest. This caught him by surprise. Don't joke, not a single bone is broken, so don't worry, I'm fine. However, to protect him, the boy held his ground, reminding him of its importance. We still have 2 full weeks of training ahead of us. If you suffer a serious injury here, you can forget about graduating. Demian didn't stop there, quickly moving to another plan. Instead, sit guard at the flag in the middle of the field. You're the only one I trust with that, and if the flag is lost, it's all on you. Kyle was silent for a moment, then laughed softly, realizing the boy really cared about him. Are you trying to save face for me while also worrying about me? Besides, in this round we're the offense, so why talk about guarding the flag? Not wanting to prolong the back and forth, he decisively grasped what he had been given and replied with a tone of assurance. Don't worry, I won't let anyone touch it. Go out there and crush them. A few short moments of rest passed and the instructor's voice rang out again. Switch sides, Platoon 1, get ready to attack. Before the formation was fully set, Demian scanned every comrade's face and cheered them on. I know everyone is exhausted, but this is the final match of the tournament. Let's do this, brothers. Since we're on the offensive in this match, I don't intend to waste time until the end of the round. The boy's eyes gradually sharpened, his resolve clearly showing in every line of his face. 5 minutes. Demian turned around, facing the formation on the other side of the battlefield with an extremely stern expression. Naturally, it wasn't just him who was determined. The mood on Platoon 3's side was also overflowing with fighting spirit. And then his voice once again echoed throughout the wide space through a firm tone. We will seize their flag and secure the victory within 5 minutes. Before the match officially began, Platoon 1 and Platoon 3 stood facing each other with spirits running high. Gazing at the opposing team, Demian silently clenched his resolve. Finally, the tournament's final match has arrived. Every battle he had gone through and each time he led his comrades through hardships flickered through his mind. I've shown everything I've got as a student platoon leader. Now is the time to make those trainers remember my name. Thinking of that, the corners of his mouth slowly curled up in excitement. The name Demian. He continued to look forward. His fighting spirit burned more intensely than ever, especially since winning this match against Platoon 3 and that Guy Appel would mean his spot as the top recruit was 100% locked in. Within the opposing ranks, Appel's figure quickly caught his eye. Looks like he's planning to stand guard over the flag himself. With that much stamina already drained, it's a waste to put him on the front line. Despite feeling sorry for him, this had been set since the match started. One way or another, they were going to collide head-on. The atmosphere on the field grew as tense as a drawn bowstring when the announcement echoed across the area. Platoon 1 attacks, Platoon 3 defends. The interplatoon championship match begins. The moment the order was given, Demian immediately turned to his group and shouted loudly, "Floor it right from the start. Everyone, stay focused and follow me." A collective response rang out with full intensity, understood. Immediately, the entire Platoon 1 quickly maneuvered into their pre-prepared formation and launched a unified charge toward the enemy's position, leaving those witnessing the scene astonished. What the hell? How are they moving so fast? They're sprinting at full speed, yet their formation hasn't shifted an inch. The more he watched, the more Gerard felt the pressure the opponents were exerting. Platoon 1, led by that Demian kid, is no joke. As that thought flashed through his mind, he immediately gave an order, raise your shields high and watch out for their platoon leader. But just as the order was given, Demian broke out of the formation with lightning speed. Too late. Mana in his body instantly surged into the arm gripping his spear. At the moment the distance between the two sides shrank to the absolute limit, he attacked decisively. With this one, I'll pierce right through. The defensive line that had been set up to block the initial charge immediately shook violently. The front line of the opposing side hurriedly shouted, "The shield been pierced." Before Demian's overwhelming power, the vital defensive point of Platoon 3 nearly collapsed in the blink of an eye. Having achieved his goal, he immediately shouted loudly to signal his teammates behind him, "The line is broken." Witnessing the terrifying scene unfold in a flash, Gerard immediately shouted orders. "No, stop them immediately." Commands were fired off one after another with the desperate determination to block the target. Take them down, right now. At the moment the encirclement was about to close, Demian's pupils suddenly flared with determination. Just as a flurry of attacks was directed at him, his body surged out of its original position, thanks to his incredibly flexible movements. Thus, at the moment the enemy's weapons crashed down, the target was no longer there. His silhouette constantly weaved through the gaps in the enemy ranks, forcing many members of Platoon 3 to stumble and fall. My ankle. While constantly on the move, Demian didn't forget to turn back and shout to his team, "Platoon 1, assemble into formation." Kyle and the remaining members immediately accelerated to deal with the panicked recruits. "You guys finally made it here, huh?" Witnessing that, Gerard's face couldn't help but pale as the tension grew with every stage. "Impossible, how can they move here this fast?" Appel, standing to one side, quickly reached a conclusion. Regardless, that guy is the biggest threat. His brows furrowed as he assessed the situation. As long as we can lock Demian down, they won't even be able to touch the flag. Having said that, he handed the flag to his platoon leader and advised, "I'll hold him off. You keep a close eye on the flag." An unconscious call escaped his lips, "Appel." Watching his back as he prepared to step into the front line, complicated emotions couldn't help but rise in Gerard's heart. I never thought there'd be a time I'd have to rely on this kid in a situation like this. Seeing Appel slowly stepping forward through the dust, Demian realized the final showdown had arrived. That image involuntarily brought back memories from his previous life. The future general, Appel. While Demian was lost in his reminiscence, Appel suddenly leaped into the air and appeared right above his head. Faced with that sudden surprise attack, he remained calm. If I want to test my limits against someone like him, this is the perfect chance. While tilting his body to avoid the strike coming down, his mind didn't stop working for a second. The first attack was just a feint. Realizing his opponent's intent, Demian's lips slowly curled up in excitement. If that's the case, his eyes remained locked on every change in Appel's movements as the next attack was quickly launched. This one is the real deal. His weapon was instantly raised, meeting the downward strike head-on and creating a violent shockwave between their two different mana flows. The well-calculated attack was countered precisely, leaving Appel unable to hide his surprise. However, he quickly adjusted his rhythm and retreated backward. Meanwhile, Demian's hand tightened around the handle of his weapon while mana continuously gathered inside. "Give it your all, Appel." His fighting spirit soared higher and higher. "The distance between us vanished in a flash because I'm also going to use my full power to take you down." When the powerful strike landed, Appel had managed to raise his weapon in time to defend. Of course, Demian wasn't going to give up right there. He decisively raised his staff again. And then, another ferocious blow came down. The force transmitted through the weapon made Appel's face change instantly. The mana is so strong it almost broke the spear. Constantly receiving the rapid-fire attacks from the front, Appel felt more and more astonished. Is this guy really a commoner? Don't tell me he's just like me. The confusion in his heart grew greater than ever before at the variable that was Demian. How could he control mana with such finesse? Facing the source of the powerful energy before him, Appel couldn't help but offer a forced smile inwardly. I never thought that, only 2 weeks into this crummy training camp, I'd run into such an impenetrable wall. After a while of trading blows, Demian suddenly pulled back his stance and spoke calmly. "Let's end this, Appel." He instantly released all the power he had been accumulating in his body, turning it into a shockwave as he lunged straight forward. "You definitely can't block this one." The tip of the spear tore through the wind and struck, breaking the weapon guarding Appel's chest in the blink of an eye and landing straight on his body without a doubt. The powerful force sent him flying away, and he rolled across the ground several times. Struggling to stand up, Appel frowned because the pain was continuously spreading throughout his body. Seizing the moment when his opponent was unable to resist, Demian immediately ignored him and accelerated toward the target. Behind him, he could only watch helplessly without being able to do anything. Damn it, the flag. His vision gradually blurred, but he still tried to focus on his team's symbol. In just a split second, Demian successfully snatched the flag and raised it high above his head as the trainer's voice rang out, "Platoon 1 wins." Witnessing that scene, Appel could only grit his teeth and accept the result. Carrying the flag in his hand, Demian quickly approached the person who had just given him a real fight. He then reached out to pull his opponent up and praised him. "Great match, Appel." He nodded in return. "Congrats, but I won't lose next time." Facing that determined declaration, Demian flashed a bright smile as he suggested, "Well, let's be on the same team next time for our own sake, because I don't think I have enough energy to beat you up a second time." Facing that bright smile as radiant as the sun, Appel felt no annoyance at all. Once he stood steady again, he lightly punched his friend's chest and replied, "Stop being so humble." Demian felt an internal surge of excitement thinking about the future. I actually defeated Appel Vanstrel. Who knows, maybe this experience accidentally turned him into an even more terrifying monster. Quickly brushing that aside, Demian turned to look at his teammates cheering incessantly. "I'll think about that later. For now, I need to enjoy this victory with my brothers." Meanwhile, at a spot not far from the competition area, the trainer witnessed everything and concluded calmly, "So, everything wraps up with Platoon 1's victory. I must ensure the remaining 2 weeks of training also proceed as smoothly as this." Hearing this, Leonhardt behind him just smiled and confirmed, "Indeed, for now." His gaze captured the moment Demian was enjoying the cheers from his squad. Just let the kids taste the sweet flavor of victory for now. Kyle stood firmly in front of the table filled with enticing food. What is this? Are you serious? He couldn't hide his excitement mixed with hunger as he yelled. We get to eat steak right here in the training camp. Winning this tournament was truly worth every penny. Demian saw his comrades devouring every piece of meat and silently marveled. They just exhausted themselves and look at how energetic they are. But it makes sense. It's not like we get to stuff ourselves with meat every day. He looked left and right searching for someone's figure. Master, looks like he already left. What a shame, I still wanted to talk to him a bit more. Suddenly, Raven appeared and wanted to join. Can I sit here with you guys? A student immediately stood up and quickly offered his seat. Trainer, yes please, go ahead and sit. He took the opportunity to sit down beside him, clearly showing curiosity. Demian, are you still holding onto the decision you made yesterday? I mean, about Coach Leonhardt's offer. He didn't react with much excitement and just answered, yes, that's right, sir. Raven heard this and could only offer a helpless, forced smile. Such a pity, such a rare opportunity. He glanced over, probing, but have you heard about this yet? Demian was curious. What is it, sir? Raven recounted an event that had taken place recently. Coach Leonhardt also extended an invitation to the Knight's Order to Appel. Guess what his answer was? Nevertheless, he calmly replied, whatever he chooses, I respect it. Appel's life is his own to decide. He couldn't help but laugh at that answer. You really are a boring kid. Raven kept his eyes on the person opposite him for a few seconds and then thought to himself, I intended to come over and convince you to reconsider the Knight's Order, but it looks like nothing I say will change your mind now. If that's the case. He stood up and raised his glass, his voice filled with goodwill. Attention, everyone, you've all worked very hard over the past 2 weeks. I wish you all the best. Tomorrow we'll be back to intense training. Prepare yourselves. I hope you'll all train with everything you've got to achieve your personal goals. Everyone happily responded by raising their glasses in unison. Glory to the kingdom. Time flew by, and before they knew it, the third and final week of training had arrived. The trainer stood with his arms crossed, roaring and urging, thrust harder, come on faster. Demian observed his surroundings, his lips curling up in satisfaction as he realized the recruits' attitudes had clearly changed completely. And it wasn't just his platoon, the entire training camp 3 was changing in a more positive direction. It seems that the previous platoon tournament was a huge catalyst. The trainer's voice rang out loudly. Everyone, attention, 5-minute break. Kyle panted as he approached to probe. Demian, have you heard the news yet? He turned, puzzled. What news? He relayed what he had heard. I heard Platoon 4's morale has been pathetic ever since that tournament. Their dropout rate is skyrocketing right about now. Kyle burst into a smug laugh, especially their platoon leader. As soon as the tournament flopped, that guy ran away clean. Demian also smirked sarcastically, truly shameful. Suddenly, he turned around and dropped a question. But Kyle, you know what's most important right now, don't you? Demian seriously faced everyone and reminded them. It's true we got a bunch of collective points for winning the tournament, but if you want a decent position later, you need to worry about your individual scores. Everyone here dreams of setting foot in the royal palace, don't they? The most lucrative job any commoner recruit dreams of, royal palace administrative soldier. But out of 160 people here, only exactly 30 people get to apply. And even then, the internal competition ratio is so fierce that only 1/3 of the applicants actually get in. Kyle was laughing and having fun at first, but now he grew serious. Sounds pretty stressful, doesn't it? Demian glanced back, revealing a truth. After all, everyone who joined the army here did it for that exact purpose. He realized something was wrong, grabbed his friend's shoulder and questioned him. Wait, don't tell me you're aiming for that royal administrative seat too. He sighed wearily and explained, I have no intention of joining the royal palace. But Kyle didn't listen. Why not? Do you like being a royal administrative soldier that much? Demian regained his composure to point out the harsh reality of prestige. Do you know that if you get in, you'll be buried inside that palace all day? Which made him pause for a few seconds. I know, but it does feel a bit suffocating, but it's still the best place to be. Wouldn't it be a waste not to go? He lightly brushed off his shirt and bluntly exposed, forget it. Someone like you would be running away with your tail between your legs in less than a month. You're the type who likes to be active and show off. Being stuck in one place like that would bore you to death. Kyle couldn't argue but was still curious. So, where the hell are you planning to go? Demian looked up with a determined gaze and declared, I'm joining Neocalis. Just one name dropped was enough to make everyone's faces pale. He was shocked to the point of distorting his face and yelled, Neocalis, is that the place I'm thinking of, guys? Demian has officially gone crazy. He was immediately kicked in the shin. Shut your mouth, the general. Kyle bent over in pain, clutching his leg, but laughed. Demian, just as I suspected. He was a bit surprised by that attitude. What do you mean? He looked up, excited, and cheered. You really are a certified lunatic and a methodical, reckless one at that. But that's exactly why I love hanging out with you. Right at that moment, the trainer loudly reminded them. Break time. Over, everyone assemble and continue training. Kyle quickly stood up, urging while walking, let's go train, we just got rid of a tough competitor for the administrative spot. After the training session, Maris stepped onto the podium to speak. You've all worked very hard over the past month. Demian listened silently, but his heart was deeply moved. I can't believe the day to complete the training course has arrived. It feels like we just enlisted yesterday. He looked down at the group of students, smiling encouragingly. I will cheer for your future efforts. After leaving this training camp, continue to fight and move forward so you can contribute to the kingdom. Suddenly, Raven looked toward him and whispered a reminder. Demian. He immediately understood, stood in a proper posture, and shouted loudly to coordinate the legion. Attention, Ten Hut, salute the company commander, glory to the kingdom. Afterward, it was his turn to announce. That's all. The closing ceremony for the training course ends here. Next, I will announce the list of the 5 most excellent recruits of the course. Raiden began to reveal the first identity. Platoon leader of Platoon 1, Demian. He sent his congratulations. Congratulations. His eyes brightened and he hurriedly replied, Yes, sir. His mind was jubilant, as if climbing to the 9th cloud. Great, I did it. Raven continued to announce the second person. Next is Appel of Platoon 3. He stepped forward, his voice responding, Here, sir. Afterward, familiar names were mentioned. Kyle of Platoon 1, Platoon 3 leader Gerard, Platoon 2 leader Alex. After finishing the announcement, he suggested, All 5 of you follow me. As a reward, each of you will receive a piece of equipment of your choice from the armory. They followed each other to a large door. Raven explained how to receive the reward. You can take anything inside. We will start with the one who had the highest score. Demian, you go first. He stepped inside, extremely eager. Yes, sir. His heart was celebrating. This is the moment I've been waiting for all this time. Demian scanned the space and commented, It's arranged pretty neatly in here, isn't it? He casually picked up a few items to examine. Is this a magic potion? I wonder if there's some hidden treasure in this armory I don't know about yet. He quickly put them down, telling himself to focus. At a glance, it doesn't seem like it. I'll just take what I need and get out of here. Exactly as I heard. Since the moment he stepped in here, his eyes had not been able to leave it. Demian reached out to grab something. Found you. It turned out what he was keeping was a ring. The item that the subordinate at Training Camp 3 had whispered to him about. A ring with the ability to activate an invisibility spell for a short moment when mana is channeled into it. Having obtained what he wanted, Demian quickly left. The rest of the recruits definitely won't notice this ring since none of them know how to use mana. Until he passed Appel, his mind changed. Except for one person, and that's him. Raven stood outside and announced, Next is Appel, you go in. He stepped straight inside. Yes, sir. He stood outside waiting silently. But in my previous life, the one who took this ring was Appel, right? He definitely used mana to sense the special nature of this ring. Demian's gaze became more serious. Now I'm curious to see what he'll bring out to replace it. When he saw his opponent come out just after entering, he couldn't help but be stunned. He came out much faster than I thought. Did he decide what to choose beforehand? Kyle beside him saw him staring blankly and asked, Hey Demian, is something wrong? Demian quickly shook his head to deny, No, nothing at all, sir. But he had implicitly remembered everything. There's no mistake, that emblem Appel just brought out. It is engraved with the family crest of a kingdom that perished a long time ago. I've always wondered how he knew how to use mana at this age. A thought suddenly flashed. Don't tell me Appel has a close connection to that ancient kingdom. Raven locked the large door and inquired, All right, everyone brought one item out, right? He rubbed his chin, contemplating Appel's choice. Appel, do you know what this is? He explained very calmly. I just felt divine energy from it, so I brought it with me. Raven smiled in satisfaction when he saw the other person understood, offering more information. Divine energy? That makes sense. This is a seal bestowed with the power to ward off evil and avoid disaster. He looked at the two people beside him and marveled. You brought the spear, right? That's good. And over there is the shield crafted by the artisan Walter. Finally, his eyes stopped on him. Raben was somewhat hesitant. Endymion, are you sure about choosing that one? That ring only helps you reduce a bit of body weight. He heard this and opened his mouth in surprise. Body weight, sir. He was momentarily stunned and suggested, did you choose it randomly without knowing anything? Let me try wearing it. But Demian had quickly put it on himself. Afterward, he tried moving on the spot, his brows raised in surprise. Looks like it helps me feel lighter than I expected. With this, I'll move much faster on the battlefield. Raben approached and seriously asked, are you satisfied? Demian nodded decisively and explained, yes, in reality it's much better than I thought. Nevertheless, deep in his heart, he was extremely excited. Both invisible and lighter weight, this ring is truly and rank a holy item. Raben saw everyone was satisfied, so he announced the next process. Now, everyone, let's head back. You also need to go submit your unit preference applications. Upon entering the room, Raben handed out sheets with the request, you should fill yours out too, Demian. He still firmly chose the Neokali's unit. He observed and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The more he thought, the more regrettable it was. If Demian joined the Knight's Order, he would surely go far. Demian stopped writing and handed the preference sheet back. I'm done, sir. Raben reached out to receive it. Very well. He was still worried, so he gave a detailed reminder. Of course, I know you can handle yourself, but that place is extremely dangerous, so be careful. He heard this and nodded in response. Yes, sir, thank you for your concern. Raben finally breathed a sigh of relief and announced, you've worked very hard this past month. In a few days, you will receive notification and can set off. Demian bowed one more time to express, thank you for everything, trainer. He pushed the door and left the room after everything was finished. Demian's gaze looked back at the familiar space he had become attached to. Finally, I'm about to go there. I don't know why I have a feeling of being both happy and sad. Suddenly, a call echoed throughout the hallway. Demian. He was slightly surprised when the other person sought him out. Appel, he approached, burning with anger. I heard what the instructor said. Appel angrily raised his voice to question him. Why didn't you join the Knight Order? With your level, you're more than qualified. Demian shook his head to express his stance. That place doesn't belong to me. He bit his lower lip to hold back his emotions, lowering his voice as he recounted. I'm joining the Knight Order. I've already received a recommendation letter from Instructor Leonhardt. Since he already knew, he just smiled encouragingly. That's a wise choice. I'm sure you'll do great. That only made Appel more frustrated, yet he could do nothing. You call it a wise choice, yet you refuse it yourself. You're impossible to figure out, Demian. He looked up, reminding him seriously, that Neokali's unit you signed up for, I heard it's incredibly dangerous. Make sure you take care of yourself. They shook hands firmly, brimming with spirit. Appel promised with a smile, we definitely have to meet again, Demian. He curled the corners of his mouth slightly to express, thanks. His gaze followed Appel's retreating figure as he thought to himself, I wonder if he knows that in the distant future he will become a grand general of the Baroque kingdom. Maybe he'll even become stronger than a monster. Regardless, I'm really looking forward to Appel's future. Demian spun around with rare excitement. Well, I guess I should go say goodbye to the others. By the time he returned to the room, everyone had already finished packing their clothes and belongings. When Kyle saw him, he rushed over and called out loudly, Demian. He laughed and teased him. We thought you were going to leave without saying a word. Demian sighed and expressed his sentiments. I had to say goodbye, who knows when we'll meet again. Suddenly, Kyle laughed and dropped a hint. You'll see me sooner than you think. He then turned to everyone and announced loudly, all right, our team leader wants to say a final goodbye, so everyone quiet down and pay attention. Demian held his head high with joy-filled eyes and spoke sincerely. You've all worked hard. Thank you for following me. Do your best in your new units. Everyone responded in unison. Thank you for everything, Demian. See you soon. He nodded with satisfaction and replied, I wish you all the best. A while later, Demian had taken off his uniform and changed into civilian clothes. Just then, Dial's soft voice sounded nearby. Demian. He paused for a beat before turning to observe her. She smiled brightly as she greeted him. Long time no see, Demian. I'm Dial from the Hamel Trading Guild. It's a pleasure to meet you. Cutting to the scene at a building in town, Dial had everything prepared that he needed. First, here is a detailed document on how your investment is being utilized. She presented everything seriously. Based on your conditions, we project a profit return of 3% of net revenue. Demian examined each page with surprise and satisfaction. Not bad. I didn't expect her to plan out the use of my investments so neatly. Dial offered a professional smile. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. He put the document down and wrapped it up. After seeing this, I don't have any more questions. Just go ahead with it. Later on, a staff member will bring the insurance money registered in my name over. She collected the documents, intending to move on to the next procedure. Understood. What about the detailed contract? Suddenly, Demian waved his hand to decline. That won't be necessary. Contracts are only necessary when there's friction between two parties. I trust you'll handle everything well. That sudden display of trust also left Dial quite stunned. You really are a very special person. He placed a small chest on the table and said, please check it. This is the investment as promised. As soon as it opened, she couldn't hide her astonishment. Demian. As soon as it opened, she couldn't hide her astonishment. Demian. Dial was shocked, estimating the investment to be 300 gold coins as promised, but a glance showed it must be over 500. Demian snapped his fingers and explained, that's just my token of appreciation for your hard work. She still couldn't recover, intending to correct a few points. Then I have to adjust the investment amount in the contract. But he still stopped her. It's fine. Deep down, he had been satisfied from the start. She had easily looked down on him because of his young age and appearance. But the documents she prepared for him as a real investor were quite impressive. Dial was suddenly curious about the other party's aspirations. You just finished your training course, right? That means you're about to move to your assigned unit. Where are you going? He calmly and honestly shared, I'm heading west. I've registered for the Neocalli's unit near the Bronzerian forest. She went from one surprise to another. What? The Neocalli's unit? Don't tell me you volunteered for that. Demian shrugged with a hint of arrogance. Do you think the top student of the class would be forced to go there? The corners of Demian's mouth curled up as he teased her. What's the matter? If I end up dead, that investment would belong to the Hamel Trading Guild anyway. Unexpectedly, Dial reminded him very seriously. Please don't say things like that. I don't like that kind of joke. That made him raise his eyebrows in secret admiration. I thought she was just a gentle woman, but at times like this, she's as sharp as a razor. She regained her gentle demeanor and asked further, when are you departing? Demian answered truthfully, 3 days from now. Dial then stood up and made a credible promise. Understood. I will utilize the investment you entrusted to me in the most effective way possible. Seeing her leave, he breathed a sigh of relief. Investment matter is all settled. Demian looked excited, determined to enjoy himself. All right, in 3 days, I'll be buried in that terrifying forest. I have to eat some good food to my heart's content until then. So he dived into a tavern, downing many glasses of beer with great satisfaction. Then Demian stopped by a grilled meat stall, buying many skewers and eating ravenously. When he got sleepy, he lay down right on the street and fell into a deep, sound sleep. By the day of departure, Demian held the map and muttered, I should probably get going now. He glanced back to check the supplies. The necessary gear is all packed, time to go. But suddenly a strange feeling pressed against his back, making Demian shudder. Why all of a sudden? When he turned, he was incredibly stunned to see Kyle. Why are you here? He laughed out loud. Didn't I tell you we'd see each other again soon? Demian narrowed his eyes inquisitively. Kyle, don't tell me you. Suddenly Kyle called out directly, Demian. He spoke with assertive spirit, declaring clearly, do you really think our relationship stops at being classmates in the training camp? I also signed up for the Neocalli's unit. Demian, let's both do a great job there, how about it? Kyle walked up, draped his arm over Demian's shoulder and urged, let's go. Just as the two of them were about to leave, a voice called out to stop them. Wait a second. This made Kyle look up in surprise. What? Dial walked over shyly and said, thank goodness I'm not too late. Kyle looked at the girl blankly and asked, what wind brought you here? Demian was also curious. What's with all this stuff? She explained, I heard the Neocalli's unit is stationed very far away, so I prepared this wagon for your journey. Inside, there are snacks that last a long time, along with some necessities you might need. Demian asked, even more curiously, but why go through all that trouble? Recalling his face from earlier and his words, she affirmed, just to repay the favor you showed me, just like the way you repaid my sincerity. Demian, our trading guild always keeps in mind the principle of reciprocity, so I spent the last 2 days gathering all this. She urged them, have a safe journey, both of you. The gift made Kyle very interested as he praised, she's certainly generous. Dial scratched her head when praised, Demian smiled and said, "Think of this as an investment since you told me to invest more later." Dial was startled and asked, "What did you say?" He laughed until his stomach hurt, thinking to himself, "She's a terrible liar, but this girl is more interesting than I thought." He then turned away, leaving behind a promise. "All right, see you later." Dial bowed and replied, "Yes, goodbye, Demian." Both men stepped onto the carriage as it departed. Dial stood behind, watching the carriage disappear into the distance. Kyle and Demian's journey lasted a few days. Finally, they could see a town in the distance. Kyle sat in the wagon, nauseous, and complained, "Damn it, why is this road so bumpy?" Demian remarked, "Walking probably would have left my limbs falling off." He pointed outside and announced, "Regardless, seeing the Urkel Defense Force emblem means we've arrived in Urkel." Kyle wondered why there were no civilians in sight. Demian leaned his arm against the back wall and explained, "It's probably the monsters, or maybe they're all inside the Bronzerian forest. Most of the residents in Urkel make a living by going into the Bronzerian forest to pick a type of herb called amancho. Amancho is a poisonous plant that causes high fever and diarrhea, but if processed correctly, it becomes the main ingredient for a highly effective painkiller. Since 60% of the kingdom's amancho supply comes from the Bronzerian forest, no matter how dangerous it is, the villagers can't give up their livelihood." After getting off the carriage, Demian eagerly urged, "Let's get to the base, let's go." Both entered Urkel, where the streets were deserted and desolate. Kyle frowned and spoke up, "Hey Demian, don't tell me." He pointed ahead and asked, "That building, right? Are you sure people can live there? It looks like it'll collapse if you just touch it." Meanwhile, Demian subtly caught the scent of blood nearby. Not hearing a response, Kyle asked, "Demian," he reminded him, "someone is coming." From far away, a rather large group of people walked toward them. This group didn't seem too strong. Some were even injured and had to be supported by others to walk. On the shoulder armor of all of them was the engraved emblem and the word Neo. As the group passed Demian, one young man shot him a glare that was anything but friendly. Afterward, the group vanished behind the dark door. Kyle looked at them and exclaimed, "Good grief, look at their faces, they look like wandering ghosts." Demian just sighed as he reminded him, "You have to get used to that, Kyle. This is a place where people face life and death every single day." He silently wondered why he was suddenly reminded of that incident now. Recalling the past, Demian once stood before a platoon and asked, "In your opinion, what is the most important duty of a soldier?" They excitedly answered from their own perspectives, "To absolutely follow orders. Isn't it to destroy the enemy as efficiently as possible? Even if I die, I have to take 20 of them down with me." Demian frowned, showing he didn't agree with those views. Then he used his strength to rap one soldier on the head, making him cry out in pain and confusion. "Why did you only rap my head?" Demian replied, "Because your answer was the worst. Listen carefully, the correct answer is do not die." He affirmed, "You are forbidden from dying, never treat your own life cheaply. At all costs, you must survive and return. We must become strong so we don't lose our lives. Is that clear?" Back in the present, Demian sighed and thought, "I still remember the look on their faces when I said that, even though in the end, every single one of them died." Afterward, he informed his companion, "Let's go inside, Kyle," he asked back, confused. Now, Demian turned to ask, "Did you forget why we came here? We came here to become stronger. Standing around here is just wasting time." Kyle replied anxiously, "Hey Demian, you saw how they looked earlier. The air inside must be stifling. Why don't we wait a bit and—" But no matter what he said, Demian didn't stop his steps toward the dark door, leaving Kyle helpless. He ran after him in fear and shouted loudly, "Demian, wait." At the Neo-Kali's unit, Victor angrily threw his sword into the crate and scolded, "Damn it, those bastards from the defense force. They said clearly there were only a few orcs, but there were over 30, and they even brought an orc wizard along." Russell reported anxiously, "Sergeant Carissa's arm is dangling and almost completely detached now. If it isn't treated immediately, he'll be forced to be discharged." For the members of Neo-Kalis who were sent there as a severe disciplinary punishment, there was no choice called discharge. It was either rot in prison for the rest of their lives, or struggle in this living hell, or be squeezed dry of labor at Neo-Kalis and discarded like a dirty rag. Victor felt choked with resentment and shouted, "Damn it, discharged. If he's crippled and tossed out on the street, what is he supposed to eat?" On the Neo-Kalis captain's side, Terran seemed calmer as he proposed a solution. "First, get a doctor, then try to invite a priest from the temple to see." Fabian asked, "Captain, do you know how much those religious fanatics are charging? Our salaries wouldn't even cover the tip." Terran bluntly brought out his coin purse and replied, It's 20 gold coins, pool the money together. Victor shouted angrily, Captain, isn't this the money you were saving for your mother's surgery? He answered with a forced smile. Her condition has improved. The doctor said an operation isn't urgently needed yet. The other soldiers looked at each other in the eyes. Everyone understood how much their captain had sacrificed for their unit. Everyone then pooled their money together in solidarity. Damn it, count me in. Me too. Dianel brought his contribution hesitantly and whispered, I'd like to chip in too. Victor shouted angrily, Hey, since when does the rookie who just joined start chipping in money? Take that money and buy yourself a new pair of boots to replace that tattered pair of yours, kid. The younger one trembled, his voice pleading, Please let me contribute. Sergeant Caress was so severely injured because he saved me. Victor was choked up and cursed, Damn it, what a good kid. Taran then ordered one of the soldiers, This will take some time, so go get the priest from the temple first. He quickly ran outside to follow the order. Yes, sir. Taran turned to ask another person, Dianel, how old are you this year? He replied, I'm 18, sir. Taran placed a hand on his comrade's shoulder and praised, It's been a year since our youngest enlisted. Now, as long as Caris holds on. From behind him, someone suddenly called out, Captain, I'm reporting, the new recruits we were informed about have arrived. Everyone heard this and cast suspicious looks toward them. Taran answered, New recruits. The intense fighting made me completely forget. He called out loudly, Dianel, he replied, Here, sir. Taran draped his arm over the youngest one's shoulder and informed him, Let's go. It's time to go pick up your subordinates. In the office, Taran looked at the two new arrivals and asked, Are you the new recruits from this batch? Both answered in unison, Yes. He silently evaluated each one. That kid looks capable. His build and strength seem pretty good. When looking toward Demian, Taran hesitated. He asked, Are you really only 13 years old? He nodded, That's right, sir. Taran thought to himself, He's even younger than Dianel, our youngest, by 5 years. Why would a kid this young volunteer to join here? He helplessly put the paper down and muttered, Forget it, I don't know what these kids are thinking these days. Kyle pointed at Demian and affirmed, but he was the top student of the training course. Taran was confused, top student. He reminded him softly, So what? The training camp and this place are two completely different worlds. Demian replied, I know, sir. Looking at the boy's nonchalant expression made him blink and ask, You know that and you still showed your face here. He then called out loudly, Dianel, he replied, Here, sir. Taran pointed at the two new recruits and ordered, Take them to get their spots and tell them to clean up. Dianel replied, Yes, sir. Afterward, he glanced at the two of them and informed, Follow me. Demian and Kyle followed Dianel down the unit's hallway. He slowly explained everything. In Neocollies, there are no ranks. Forget about titles like platoon leader or company commander. The guy earlier is the unit commander and the one next to him is the deputy. Under them, whoever arrives first is the senior. The seniority order is extremely strict. Stepping into the sleeping room, Dianel announced, Pick whichever bed you like, though you won't be able to stay in them for long anyway. Kyle asked curiously, What do you mean? Dianel answered, I've been here for a whole year and I'm still the newest one. Do you understand what that means? Kyle replied, How would I know? As soon as he finished, he kicked Kyle's leg hard. He hunched over in pain, holding his leg and growling. Dianel looked at the two new recruits with eyes full of hatred and pain. It means. He grit his teeth, that everyone who came after me is dead and buried. That one sentence left Demian and Kyle stunned, unable to say a word. Dianel then turned to leave the room, not forgetting to remind them. Focus on unloading your things and cleaning up the barracks first. Once you're done, I'll explain the rest. Kyle sat down on his bed, while Demian turned to carefully observe the room. Kyle angrily cursed, What kind of jerk talks like that? Seeing that Demian didn't seem angry at all, he wondered, Why are you still smiling? He just nonchalantly replied, I smile because I want to. Demian thought to himself, Looks like he hasn't changed a bit. Then he loudly reminded him, Focus on cleaning. Kyle wondered, Are you serious? Demian picked up a cloth and replied, Since we have to do it anyway, we might as well do it properly. This is our first mission, isn't it? Demian didn't forget to tease him, Clean it so well that you could lick it off the floor. This one sentence made Kyle shout back angrily, Do I look like a janitor to you? A while later, at the Neocollies unit's dining hall, Dianel sat quietly in a corner thinking to himself, I'm scared. Every time a new teammate joins and I end up liking and getting close to them. Recalling that time he had spoken in a friendly manner to his new teammates, Today is your first mission, right? Watch closely. Today's work is light, so just stay in the back. A single minute of distraction is enough to cost you your life. Neocollies is exactly that kind of place. Because I don't know since when, I stopped paying attention to the new recruits. Because sooner or later, they will lose their lives as time goes by anyway. But for some reason, these new kids make me worry, especially that boy. The look in his eyes is as if he already knew me from before. While lost in thought, Caddif announced, "Is that Dianel? I finished fixing the soles for your boots." He took the boots and didn't forget to respond, "Thank you, sir." He took the money and chatted, "Hey, I saw a few kids standing blankly in front of the unit gate earlier. Are they the new recruits?" Dianel replied, "You saw them." Caddif asked again, "They looked so clueless I thought they were from the defense force, but it turns out they're your juniors." He didn't dare answer that question, only slightly bowing to respond, "I'll stop by again next time." Dianel walked while thinking, "Juniors, damn it, I have to go back to the room and crush that arrogance of theirs." Looking at the unit gate appearing before his eyes, Dianel whispered to himself, "Energetic, confident, proud, those things will only get you killed in this place. I hope they didn't just do a sloppy job cleaning." Just as he stepped through the door, everything happening made him startled and panicked. Demian, with his face covered in mud, turned to greet him. "You're back." Everything in the room was blindingly clean, and he called out, "Private Dianel." Two others also stepped forward, patting Dianel on the shoulder and said, "We're startled too. Dianel, how hard did you make the new kids work?" He stammered in fear, "I didn't do anything, sir." Demian then carried a basin of water over to report, "We have finished cleaning as ordered. May I ask you to inspect if anything is still not up to par?" Dianel looked at the room, which was sparkling clean without a speck of dust, feeling bewildered and anxious in his heart. Usually when I tell them to clean, they just do it half-heartedly. How can it be this spotless? Or is it? He asked himself, is this supposed to be some sort of subtle intimidation? Terran stood behind, laughing loudly and very happily. He praised, "These new recruits are truly excellent. It looks like a newly built barracks." Seeing this expression from Terran made the other soldiers bewildered. Is the commander laughing, the person who's known for having no emotions? Terran then called out seriously, "New recruits, come here and let me see." He asked again, "Did you two clean all this by yourselves?" Both answered in unison, "Yes, sir." He asked curiously, "Why clean so thoroughly? A perfunctory job would have been enough." Demian replied seriously, "Those were the orders of our senior, Dianel. We only executed them seriously because they were orders from our predecessor." Terran heard this and looked deep into the young soldier's eyes, thinking, having spent years rolling around on the battlefield where the line between life and death is thin, I only need a glance to know a person's capability. That big kid over there just needs a bit of training and can be thrown into battle right away, but I can't see through this kid at all. Why would a valedictorian of the training camp dive headfirst into this misery? There must be some hidden reason why he volunteered to come here. But before clarifying that, Terran ordered, "Attention, everyone, listen carefully." Everyone looked over curiously, not knowing what the order would be this time. But contrary to the serious tone of his words, Terran smiled and announced, "From today on, these two are the little brothers of our unit. Welcome them." Demian and Kyle looked at each other and smiled happily. This was the result they deserved for their serious and dedicated attitude. Dianel lay on the wooden plank with Demian. He asked, "Demian, when do you think this war will end? Will it ever end?" Hearing that, he fell silent, his gaze sinking as he answered indifferently, "When they surrender, the war ends." Suddenly, Dianel closed his eyes, his voice becoming resolute. "Demian, you absolutely must not die before me." Demian turned to look at him with a scrutinizing gaze. "Did you eat something spoiled? Why are you suddenly talking so sentimental?" Dianel laughed it off and replied, "I just wanted to say it. Promise me, okay?" End of flashback? Demian sighed with longing, thinking to himself, "Back then I didn't bother answering him, but come to think of it, I still kept that promise." He remembered the memory of standing before Dianel's corpse. Demian's eyes were full of bloodshot anger. He charged onto the battlefield alone, slashing through dozens of enemy soldiers. "Because in the end, I lived longer than that guy." Demian's eyes were filled with sadness when remembering that image. Damn it. He sat up, covering his forehead, thinking, I can't fall back asleep anyway. I might as well practice the mana accumulation method. Then Demian quickly changed into his training clothes and stepped outside. After venturing deep into the forest, he saw someone lurking and training. Demian suspiciously asked himself, who's training at this hour? Dianel's silhouette was practicing swordplay under the soft moonlight. It's Dianel. He stood to one side, observing carefully without making a sound. He marveled inwardly. Even in my past life he was a training maniac. But, looking at him leaning on his sword, panting like an ox, Demian wondered, why does he use his sword like that? That fighting style completely clashes with his greatest strength, which is speed. Demian sighed helplessly, thinking to himself, ah, right. In my past life it took so much effort to convince him to change weapons. If I jump in and tell him now, he'll probably punch me, although he wouldn't even be able to touch me. He turned away and silently left without disturbing Diana, who was training hard. Forget it, it was hard enough to gain some goodwill. Don't let it go to waste too early. There will definitely be a suitable opportunity to talk later. The scene shifts to the next morning. Everyone gathered under the massive mountains. Everyone looked around and exclaimed to each other, oh my god, I've seen this training ground so many times and it's still terrifying. It looks like we're going to be worked to the bone on physical training today. Varen turned to the soldiers nearby and started making bets. Waiting for the captain is boring. How about a bet, guys? Bet on whether those two recruits will last until the end of today's training. The whole group heard that and clamored along, betting. I bid 10 silvers that they won't even finish the morning session. I bet 20 silvers they'll pass out as soon as the morning shift ends. Count me in. Kyle and Demian took everything into their view. He complained angrily. What are those guys doing? Are they using us as objects for gambling? Have some respect. He looked at them happily betting with each other, thinking to himself that they were probably used to it, as no one stood up to stop them. The atmosphere of this unit is truly. Demian suddenly turned and took a step forward. Kyle followed, suspiciously asking, Demian, where are you going? Suddenly he walked up to the guys who were sharing the pot and asked, leaving the whole crowd stunned, can I join in? This looks fun. They were startled. Varen laughed loudly. Scared me? The others joined in mocking. The protagonist let himself hear, did the new recruit bring any money? Demian's face remained indifferent, answering as if it were natural, I did, but I want to change the betting conditions a little. His face revealed extreme confidence, taking out a bright gold coin. I bet that in today's training session I will outperform everyone here, including my friend's team, to take the #1 spot. I'm putting down 1 gold. Their faces turned grim as they stared at Demian. He confidently stood with his hands on his hips and asked, do you guys want to add any more conditions? Their corners of their mouths curled into cunning smiles. They began to laugh with a mocking tone. This new kid is quite bloodthirsty, One person pointed at the coin and said, fine, if you win, take all this money. Varen was very excited, clenching his fist and stating a condition, and if you lose, you have to do all the laundry for us for a month. One person mocked, if you're not confident, withdraw early, kid. Demian's face remained indifferent, continuing to speak. Since we've played big with 1 gold and a laundry bet, allow me to add 1 condition of my own. Varen found it interesting and suspiciously asked, another condition, let's hear it. Demian's face sank, speaking lightly, if I win, give me full authority to rest during the regular training hours for a month. Those people were stunned because they didn't expect it. What, rest? That sounds completely unreasonable. Suddenly Terran appeared from nowhere and agreed, all right, deal. The others were startled and turned back. Captain. He turned to Diana, who was standing on the other side, and called out loudly, Diana, he suspiciously replied, yes, sir. He flashed a happy smile and pointed at the group. You join this bet too. Diana stepped forward suspiciously and asked, me? He interrupted him with a provocation. Why, afraid of losing to your juniors? Diana shook his head, his face hardening. That will never happen. I just don't want to waste money on a bet where the outcome is already known. Terran heard this and threw a silver coin over, appearing generous. Then I'll pay the bet for you. He walked in front of Demian, his figure twice as large as his, and said, new recruit, if you perform better than the seniors, I will approve your free time as you wish. During the training session, Terran turned to the group who started it and warned, but any of you who loses, I will throw you into the hellish intensive training course, so you better use all your strength. Their faces went grim with anger. Arrogant brat, I have to teach him some respect. Train like your life depends on it, boy. Demian bowed to show caution but was secretly excited. Everything is going according to plan. I really couldn't afford a little free time. He watched everyone focusing on stretching their bodies, silently calculating, regardless of the method, I must change the sluggish atmosphere of this unit. A place where everyone gives up because they don't know when they'll die. Living day by day without hope will eventually gnaw away at not only yourself but everyone around you. Terran stood with his arms crossed, looking down, his voice serious. All right, now we start physical training. He turned and pointed at the large pile of logs nearby, beginning to instruct. Today's training is to run while carrying these logs straight to the top of that rocky mountain. Everyone heard it and protested noisily. Captain, we don't usually practice this damn thing. It's fine for the new recruits. Why do we have to suffer too? Terran's veins popped, roaring angrily, silencing the whole crowd. Quiet, pick them up now, stop whining and move. They quickly climbed up the mountain while carrying the logs, everyone exhausted. Varen's group was also struggling, sweating bucket. He watched Terran standing on the cliff observing them, complaining, why on earth did the captain come up with this training drill? They grumbled with anger while struggling to climb. This is clearly because of the new recruits. They're doing this for the first time. I bet they'll collapse in a heartbeat. Varen heard that and looked down to find Demian's figure. What is that? Where is the new kid? His face was filled with fear and astonishment as he looked up. Impossible. Demian had already left them far behind. When did he crawl all the way up there? He was also gasping for air at that moment, panting with every breath. He raised his hand to look at the ring and marveled inwardly. I didn't expect it to even reduce the weight of the items I'm holding. Demian flashed a satisfied smile and exclaimed, it was a great decision to choose this ring. He turned to look down the mountain to search for the others to see where the seniors were. Demian stared at the leader below who was still far away, thinking they wouldn't catch up anytime soon. The only one trying to keep up was. Demian stared at the person straining to chase him with certainty. It must be Dianel. He carried the log while exhaling long, weary breaths. Dianel's eyes stared upward, sweat rolling down. He's almost at the top. He looked at Demian's happy and expectant face, thinking, I thought he was just at the level of a training camp valedictorian. But this. A while later, the first footsteps reached the mountain peak. Demian slammed the log onto the ground with great confidence. Number 1 position, a complete sweep. Terran, waiting on top, was quite astonished. He actually reached the finish line first. He looked at the second person approaching and also marveled. I didn't expect even Dianel to swallow such a bitter pill. Looks like we caught ourselves a much more capable kid than I thought. After waiting a while, some people reached the top of the mountain. Terran looked down at those who hadn't reached it and roared, training session ends. His face darkened, his voice making everyone tremble. As agreed, the losers will receive the hellish training. Everyone who came after the new recruits, lie down now. Suddenly, Varen rushed over with a panicked look, calling out loudly, making him suspicious. Captain, he, with a panicked and terrified face, said with a rushed voice, look towards the unit building. Terran followed where he pointed, and also widened his eyes in horror. A red flag was fluttering at the barracks in the distance, and the whole group panicked. Is that the red flag for a level 1 emergency alert? The majestic, ancient city gate stood tall under the pale yellow sunlight. Terran walked quickly inside to ask, why was the red flag raised? The subordinate reported, people have died in the Bronzerian forest, sir. He grabbed the arm of the chair, slowly sitting down. What are the victims' details and specific location? The subordinate continued. They were herb gatherers. That place belongs to the restricted area. Terran gritted his teeth, unable to hold back a curse. Damn it, why do they keep diving into a place that's already restricted? He squeezed his hand resting on the table and continued asking, have you grasped the damage level and information on the monsters that appeared yet? The subordinate reported nervously, both are still unclear, sir. However, those herb gatherers went with 6 mercenaries. He hadn't finished his sentence before being interrupted by a voice. Still no information on the monsters yet? Terran looked over. Aaron, how many people can be mobilized right now? He calculated and gave the answer. Excluding the injured, there are about 70 people. Without hesitation, he decisively made a decision. Discard the minor injuries. Assemble about 50 people. Make it quick. Aaron bowed respectfully and followed. Understood. Terran's brow furrowed tightly. He thought tensely. The situation seems critical. The frequency of military deployments is getting thicker. Is that forest changing? After those summoned were fully present, Terran walked up to them and asked, are everyone fully assembled? Everyone shouted in unison, understood, sir. He immediately ordered, everyone arm up. Just as he finished speaking, Demian approached, panting as he suggested, we want to go too. Terran turned sharply to refuse. No, training results may be good, but actual battlefields are a different story. You two stay in the barracks. His face full of seriousness and determination, Demian held his ground. We only want to follow as baggage carriers in the rear, sir. During the physical fitness test, you saw our strength and endurance already. Kyle followed up. We will definitely do a good job. He didn't answer immediately but lowered his eyes to contemplate. It's so embarrassing. Now I have to borrow the strength of these new kids. A while later, Terran turned around and dropped a sentence. All right, as long as you don't participate in the battle, just carry the spare equipment and wait in the back. Dianel, hand over the spare equipment to these kids. He shouted loudly to accept the order. Understood. Receiving permission, Demian looked at Dianel beside him. Bronzerian Forest, if I remember correctly, this was when Dianel. He was expressionless, blurting out, "There are demons in Bronzerian Forest." He planted his staff on the ground, wiping the sweat from his face, appearing somewhat incredulous. Demons? What kind of ridiculous nonsense is that? Dianel started to panic. That thing is not an ordinary monster. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it either. An orc possessed by a demon killed a steel wolf. Usually it takes 5 orcs charging in to even stand a chance. Because of it, we were forced to abandon that land. If not for that monster, Neo-Collies would not have been disbanded. Demian frowned and rubbed his head. Damn it, the information is all over the place, I can't string it together. With it being like this, even if I have to be an errand boy, I must go there to check it myself. After preparing, Terran shouted above, "Is everyone done preparing?" Everyone answered in unison, yes. He began to caution them. I'll say it again, once you step into battle, you must calculate every situation that could happen. If you see something dangerous, it's best to avoid it. The top priority for everyone is to keep your life and return safely. Is that clear? Everyone shouted, "Clear, Captain." When the preparation was finished, Terran made the decision, let's move out. Behind him, he followed the group, thinking to himself, finally, the first actual battle has arrived. Moving for a while, everyone entered the forest. He walked while assigning tasks. We'll search the surrounding area first, divide into teams of 3, but absolutely do not let each other out of your sight. Terran glanced at Demian and Kyle, reminding them, you two follow me and don't you dare fall behind. He replied, yes, sir. Kyle also nodded, understood. Meanwhile, Demian's gaze swept around, assessing the situation. So this is where the restricted area begins? There's nothing too special about this forest. Then why on earth does this place? His brows knitted tightly as if he had discovered something. Stink of blood like a battlefield. Thanks to 5 years spent teetering on the edge of life and death on the front lines, the moment he stepped in here, every instinct in his body was screaming a warning. Demian gripped his weapon tightly and told himself, this place is extremely dangerous. Just as he broke free from his thoughts, a sound suddenly rang out, grabbing everyone's attention. Terran quickly scanned the direction of the noise. Did you find something? Victor shouted to report, Captain, over here. When they rushed to the scene, the sight before them was stained a horrific, deep red. Aaron stood to the side, cautious, offering his opinion. The scouts already checked this area, so why is the weaponry left here untouched? Terran crouched down to observe closely. That goes to show just how terrified they must have been at that moment. Having said that, he looked toward a corner. What on earth kind of monster could have caused such a gruesome scene? Aaron rested his blade on his shoulder, speculating. Captain, do you think it could be an earth bear-type monster? Terran immediately rebutted. No mutated bear in this forest is capable of doing this. Aaron said tensely, then could it be an orc? But just as he finished speaking, a voice cut in, I don't think so. Aaron looked toward the direction Demian was standing in, confused. As he observed closely what lay under the boy's feet, he suddenly exclaimed, isn't that the carcass of a red bear? Demian confirmed, just as the deputy captain said, the culprit is not a bear-type creature. Then he pointed toward a tree in the distance. Looking at those claw marks, the size of its forefeet must be absolutely enormous. That's the only way to explain the wounds on that carcass, sir. Terran rested a hand on his chin, thoughtfully analyzing. Fair point, that argument is well-grounded. He asked with a hint of curiosity, where did you learn all this stuff? He answered seriously, my father used to be a hunter. I'm not exactly a woodsman, but I've heard plenty of things here and there. Terran nodded. I see, you've learned some useful things. Kyle, standing behind and listening to the whole exchange, was a bit baffled. Hey Demian, didn't you say your dad was a soldier before? Before he could finish his questioning, the boy shot him a cold, warning glare that made him shut his mouth. Time passed and Terran made his decision. That's enough for today. Retreat. Gather the bodies carefully. We have to return them to their families. Following the group as they worked together to clean up, Demian agreed. Indeed, if we just keep blindly pushing forward now, it's no different than seeking our own deaths. We've only grasped a few clues, but the whereabouts of the opponent remain an enigma. He smiled slightly, letting out a sigh of relief. He may seem cold on the surface, but he's an excellent commander. No wonder Dianel back then respected such a wonderful person. Terran was still standing to one side, seriously urging the group, "Let's pull out, hurry it up." Right at that moment, Demian was startled to discover something abnormal. He shouted at the group, "Everyone get out of the way." As soon as the words left his lips, a massive boulder fell from out of nowhere, emitting a earth-shattering sound. Many subordinates didn't dodge in time and were crushed beneath it. The area was thrown into chaos. "My leg!" Someone turned pale. "Where the hell did that massive rock fly in from?" Demian quickly turned back and called out, "Kyle." He sped up, running over to use his strength to lift the rock off the comrades. He also quickly stepped in to help, gritting his teeth to push the boulder away. After a period of struggling, it was finally lifted up. Terran saw his chance and seized it. He used his hands to pull each person out. "Hurry up, everyone else, come give a hand and rescue your comrades." Those who had been crushed trembled as they were pulled out by those on the outside. Terran crouched down and took a look. "It's over, the situation is dire." Demian, standing next to him, rummaged through his pack. "Chew on this, sir." He took out a plant and instructed him seriously. "You have to chew it for a long time to swallow the juices, that way the pain will ease somewhat." He was startled and reached out to stop Demian. "Sleeping grass might have pain-relieving effects, but it's a poisonous plant. Swallowing it directly without neutralizing the poison is." He didn't change his expression as he explained, "If eaten together with the seeds of this thistle-like fruit, it can neutralize the toxicity. While you're still conscious, try to chew as much of it as possible." Finally, Terran didn't interfere further. He fell into deep thought. This kid, how does he know about these things? Once he finished giving the painkiller to his comrades, he proposed, "Captain, we must retreat immediately. That boulder certainly didn't fall on its own. The culprit is clearly still lurking around here." Right when he finished speaking, the scene before them left Demian and the captain frozen. A monster. Seeing the giant bear before them, he couldn't help but exclaim, "This is madness, what the hell is that?" Someone couldn't help but lament, "In all my life I've never seen such a massive monster." Varen, beside him, was trembling just as much. How can a black bear transform into such a form? Without wasting another second, Terran roared, "All troops prepare for combat." Receiving the order, everyone present quickly leveled their swords forward. The bear-like monster roared loudly and charged toward them, beginning its assault. Under the destructive force of its razor-sharp claws, someone yelled a reminder, "Dodge it." Terran stayed highly focused, urging them on, "Move the injured to the rear and surround it from all four sides. Aim for its legs first." On this side, Helson swung his axe, preparing to strike the beast's leg. His comrade next to him yelled, "Helson," he reassured him, "leave it to me." Words led to action. Helson built up momentum and powerfully swung his razor-sharp axe blade down. A powerful slash landed squarely on the bear's leg. However, upon closer look, the blow didn't affect it even in the slightest. He thought to himself, this strike could split an orc's thigh in two, but it... Seeing Helson frozen and unresponsive, Terran behind him rushed closer to remind him, "Helson, focus." At that exact moment, the beast raised one arm high. Next, it decisively slammed it down onto his body. Under the immense force, both his axe and Helson's body were sent flying a distance away. He crashed onto the ground, gasping for air as he watched the beast rampaging in front of him. It approached him, once again raising its razor-sharp claws. The beast ruthlessly slammed them down. The ground beneath it shattered into many pieces. Witnessing the entire thing, Terran couldn't help but grit his teeth and curse, "Damn this monster." He glanced toward a corner, silently assessing, "3 comrades have already fallen. Today I absolutely have to take the life of this beast." Terran regained his focus, stared straight at the beast and ordered, "Charge, attack now." Every sharp sword tip was pointed straight toward it. He roared again, "Damn it, keep stabbing until you pierce through it." Seeing Demian and the others intent on moving forward, one guy blocked the two of them and stopped them. "You rookies, get to the back now." Seizing the opportunity, Terran turned back and yelled, "Dianel!" He swung his sword from a distance. "Captain." A powerful swing fell, severing the beast's legs in the nick of time. It roared in agonizing madness, mouth wide open. After being crippled, it couldn't stand steadily and collapsed right in front of Terran. He leveled his sword point at its forehead, his brows knitted tightly, and declared, "It's over." The wild beast. Feeling the aura radiating, Demian was slightly stunned. Mana. On this side, Terran swung his sword and leaped high into the air. Die. A finishing slash cut across the monster's body in an instant. After finishing the job, one guy stomped on its body, the corners of his mouth curling in excitement. "Sure enough, as long as we outnumber it, we always win." The guy beside him replied, "You got what you deserved, you pig." Terran reached toward the beast, silently evaluating it. "I don't know where this demon creature crawled out from. Furthermore, he pulled back its thick fur and discovered something abnormal. These spots. Helson asked anxiously, could it be infectious? Usually, people with infectious diseases also have spots like these. Demian, standing in a corner witnessing this, had his eyes wide open. So it really was those spots. He took a step toward the monster's carcass, suddenly appearing here. There is only one way for a grotesque creature like this to exist. We must immediately investigate the source of this monster. Terran didn't waste any more time quickly distributing tasks. Aaron, take the men and scout the surroundings. Varen, peel the hide off this thing to bring back for armor. He spoke up, cutting in immediately. It seems the hide of this thing isn't usable, sir. Aaron asked back, confused. What, why? Terran was slightly startled, biting his lip while staring intently at Demian. Terran observed the boy's expression, reaching the conclusion that the kid definitely knew something. Terran made another decision. Leave the hide, everyone retreat. Also you, that new recruit. Follow me right now. After returning to headquarters, Terran summoned Demian into a private room. Sit down. He nodded. Yes, sir. Terran's face was serious as he looked straight at Demian to ask, do you know anything about the monster with the black spots that we found in the forest? He remained silent for a moment before deciding to speak his mind. According to what I've seen, there's a high possibility that it was infected by evil mana, Makai. He was startled and blurted out, evil mana, the dark energy that dark mages often use. Demian confirmed, yes, sir. Terran said tensely, so that means there is a dark mage hiding in the forest. I assume you know dark magic is strictly forbidden. He lowered his eyes and shook his head in denial. At the moment, I still can't say for sure, sir. It could be a dark mage or it could be an evil artifact that has accumulated evil mana in that place. Evil mana, the power borrowed from worshipping and sacrificing to demons. Anyone consumed by this evil mana for a long time only meets a tragic, horrific end. Demian frowned slightly, thinking to himself, the Bronzerian forest is known for having magic stones infected with evil mana, but wasn't it supposed to be in this era that it started acting up? The existence of that magic stone was only known to the world after a catastrophe that shook the Empire in the next life. Neocalis discovers a demon-possessed monster in the Bronzerian forest. The Imperial Army puts together a punitive force, entering the Bronzerian forest to eradicate the monster. A possibility flashed through his mind. What if? His eyes widened. What if everything is just beginning at this very moment? The longer evil mana is left, the more it will assimilate and mutate other monsters, making them stronger. Therefore, if I strike before the power of the evil mana expands, I can destroy it. Terran sighed heavily. How are you so knowledgeable about these things? He shared honestly, my father used to be a hunter. Although I'm not an expert on the woods, I've overheard many things. Terran nodded. I see, you've learned some useful things. He seriously demanded, I want to hear more details about that. Having said that, Terran fell into deep thought, for their current situation was no different than a drowning man finding a plank. Demian didn't hesitate to nod. Yes, sir, my father told me that. On this side, a whine suddenly rang out. Oh man, my whole body is aching. A man clutched his head gloomily. Yesterday's mission exhausted me to the bone. At the bed, Demian picked up a pillow and reminded him, Kyle, wake up, he replied with a twisted expression. I know. Just then, Varen kicked the door open to bring news. Big trouble, everyone. I heard the Bronzerian forest has been sealed off. Starting today, not only the herb pickers but even us are barred from entry. So in the near future, we don't have to go on missions, just stay home and train. Someone clenched their fists excitedly. Awesome, that's like a gift from the heavens. The other soldiers nodded in agreement. Since so many of us are injured anyway, taking this chance to rest up is just right. Kyle saw Demian sighing and asked, Demian, why are you looking so gloomy? Aren't you happy, kid? He replied sadly, oh, it's nothing, being off is great, isn't it? After answering, Demian cupped his face with both hands, thinking to himself, given the situation of the unit right now, this is definitely the golden time for recovery, but why does it have to be right at this moment? Suddenly, a series of footsteps outside the hallway caught Kyle's attention. Someone poked their head out to gossip. Who are those guys? What are those guys from the defense force bringing their carcasses here for? What do those lazy old guys want by coming over here? On this side, Gavin sat cross-armed in the center of the room with an expressionless face. Opposite him, Terran asked vigilantly, what business do you have coming over here? He shared seriously, thanks to your timely report, the Magic Palace has agreed to lend a hand. They say they truly felt the stench of evil emanating from that monster's carcass. Terran bit his lip, reconsidering, so everything the kid Demian said was accurate. Could it be that the Bronzerian forest really has ties to evil mana? Having said that, Gavin shook his head, but nothing is certain yet. That's why they've sent divine officials to coordinate with us and open a canquate punitive sweep. His proposal made Terran look a bit gloomy. This situation is quite new, so I want to take a soldier who understands evil mana along. He quickly came up with a reason to refuse. That guy is just a rookie who just stepped into the unit. To take a kid with no actual combat experience. Before he finished his sentence, Gavin cut him off. But in the end, wasn't he the one who spotted the problem first? Hearing this, Terran hesitated. That, he worried silently. Truth be told, if I refuse this offer, he'll definitely find an excuse to make things difficult for the unit later. Finally, Terran made his decision. He glanced over and called out, "Aaron," he answered immediately, "Here, sir." On this side, while Demian was feeling down, a voice called out, "Bring Demian here to me." The scene opened before the sturdy stone walls of a towering military fortress, where the light of the kingdom's glory still carried an aura of solemnity. The perspective quickly shifted inside as Demian, a young red-haired rookie, walked leisurely into the massive command center. His casual attire without a piece of armor immediately drew puzzled looks from the heavily armed guards standing post. Approaching the massive wooden desk, Demian stood opposite Terran. The veteran officer began to outline a new, challenging mission with a serious expression, not forgetting to emphasize that the rookie had the full right to refuse this dangerous call. But without a second of hesitation, Demian decisively volunteered. Behind that eager facade, a sharp, calculating glint flashed in his eyes. He understood perfectly that venturing into this risky deployment was the absolute best opportunity to track down a specific monster infected with evil mana. Completely stunned by the kid's strange, fearless enthusiasm, the old commander was forced to concede, agreeing to set the official schedule and allowing him to withdraw. The scene cut to the dusty courtyard just outside the giant fortress gate. Still feeling uneasy about the boy's suicidal confidence, the commander insisted one last time, desperately proposing an escort team of seasoned veterans to accompany him on the journey. Accompanied by an arrogant smile that was calm to the point of being chilling, Demian bluntly refused the assistance. In his heart, he coldly calculated that dragging along slow, veteran soldiers would only ruin his chances of making a lightning-fast escape should the mission suddenly turn disastrous. With a weary sigh, the commander's face darkened as he issued a stern, strict order. Under no circumstances was the rookie allowed to engage in actual combat. Pretending to be completely naive, Demian lightly brushed off the serious warning. He playfully promised that he would only collect a few mana-restoring herbs for the team and return in one piece, before confidently walking straight toward the dangerous wilderness. Left behind in the dust, the commander stood speechless along with his subordinates, who could only stare at the receding back of the kid, whispering in utter bewilderment at the appearance of a crazy, unpredictable variable. The scene immediately shifted to the edge of the Bronzerian forest, which was shrouded in eerie mist. A large battalion with full gear was venturing deep into the treacherous woods, an impressive team specifically gathered to hunt down a forbidden dark mage. Leading the vanguard was Captain Vasil of the Urkel Guard Force, looking solemn, along with the mysterious divine official Claire of the Adelant Temple. The silent, tense march was suddenly broken when Captain Vasil caught the red-haired rookie Demian, acting like he was about to get cocky. The veteran captain aggressively confronted the kid, expecting immediate obedience. But Demian coldly shut him down. With a sarcastic half-smile, the young soldier completely ignored the veteran's authority. He heartlessly declared that because they belonged to completely different military units, the captain's rank meant absolutely nothing. Hearing this, Vasil challenged him back. "But I am an officer." Demian didn't seem to care as he replied, "Don't be so rigid, I'm going to cooperate fully anyway, so don't worry about it." Vasil gritted his teeth in anger, muttering, "That crazy guy." Witnessing the strange and disrespectful exchange that had just taken place, the attention of Saintess Claire was immediately drawn to this fearless recruit. She asked Vasil about him. When the furious captain revealed that this very kid was the first one to raise the alarm about the demonic energy in the region, Claire's bright golden eyes narrowed, staring at him with a probing gaze. Gliding over to the young soldier, the holy saintess practically backed him into a corner. Approaching Demian, Claire asked, "Are you sensing something?" Hearing the question, Demian turned back and asked her if she was a saintess. Claire continued to question him. "I heard you were the first to raise suspicions about the demonic energy. May I ask you a few questions?" Demian had nothing to hide and replied, "Of course." Demian's eyes narrowed slightly as she asked directly, Demian, how did you know it was demonic energy? Sensing the probing gaze from the other side, Demian couldn't help but be on guard, wondering if she was suspecting him. After carefully arranging his words, Demian replied slowly, I heard it from my late father. He had encountered something similar. Hearing this, Claire was somewhat surprised and asked, could you tell me more in detail? Demian asked Claire back if she had examined the corpse, and Claire quickly confirmed that she had inspected it together with the high priest. Demian's expression turned serious as he spoke. I know most of the monsters in the Bronzerian forest, but that one was the first time I've ever seen one like it in my life. It lacked rationality and had black spots on its skin, so I thought it had been infected by demonic energy. Claire asked suspiciously, did you learn this from your father? Demian nodded to confirm it. Claire said goodbye and left once she had heard his answer. Afterward, Claire approached Vasil and spoke up. Perhaps we need to advance a bit deeper. Hearing that, Vasil immediately called out to the soldiers, everyone, advance deeper. Report immediately if you see anything suspicious around. The heavy footsteps of the army echoed throughout the forest. Demian silently retreated to the edge of the formation. He calculated that the regular soldiers could handle basic scouting, but he knew he needed to go much deeper to intercept his true target. Suddenly, a guard spotted Demian crouching in the dense bushes and panicked. He shouted to the others that there might be a monster lurking nearby, and weapons were immediately drawn. But the panic quickly turned into annoyance when they realized Demian was just happily digging up a rare mana-restoring root. Feeling completely foolish, the guards turned red with rage and shouted at the new recruit, asking if he thought he was out for a picnic in the woods. The innocent look on Demian's face vanished immediately. He cast a cold, deadly glare at the guard who had just shouted. He warned him in a chilling tone that speaking without thinking would lead to an early grave. He calmly reminded the angry soldiers that searching was their job, not his, and asked what problem there was with his actions just now. The guard shouted, you're the reason the whole team got startled. Stop doing things that hinder the search. Demian ruthlessly mocked their cowardly reaction. He pointed out that if a rustling bush was enough to make them tremble in fear, then their pathetic standard was dragging the reputation of the entire guard force through the mud. Before the angry guard could fire back, Captain Vasil stepped straight into the middle of the argument to extinguish it. He sternly scolded Demian for his impulsive behavior, warning the kid not to do anything else that could ruin the search mission. Playing the part of a cooperative recruit, Demian gently agreed to stay within the designated area. With a weary, frustrated sigh, the captain turned his back on the head-shaking new recruit. He ordered his men to drop some of their heavy gear to begin a thorough sweep of the terrain. The quiet search was suddenly torn apart when the dense bushes shook violently. A cluster of terrifyingly glowing red eyes pierced through the dark foliage, and panicked battle cries echoed throughout the unit as a horde of giant monsters spilled out from the forest edge. At first glance, the complacent veteran soldiers shrugged, looking down on the ambush. Seeing only a pack of ordinary wild orcs, they confidently drew their weapons, expecting a quick and easy slaughter. But their arrogant smiles were instantly extinguished in the blink of an eye when they looked closer. One of the soldiers froze in utter horror upon discovering the sickly black spots and the fire-red eyes covering the creatures' bodies. The terrifying truth struck them. These were not ordinary monsters, but savage orcs that had been completely mutated by evil demonic energy. With a thunderous roar, a giant corrupted beast charged straight at the front line. Moving at an unnatural speed, the monster easily closed the distance before anyone could react. A heavy blade swung down, aimed straight at the guard who was standing frozen. The others shouted for him to back off, but it was too late. The guard was completely frozen in fear, resigned to a brutal death as he realized the strike was simply too fast to dodge, but the lethal blow never hit the target. A jarring metallic clang echoed throughout the forest as the heavy attack was perfectly deflected. A loud, sharp command rang out, "Snap out of it." It was Demian, with a stream of vibrant mana flaring up around his body. The new recruit coldly asked the terrified veteran how much further he intended to drag the proud reputation of their unit through the dirt. On this side, Captain Vasil immediately shouted to warn everyone, "All troops form ranks. Split into groups of 3 to block the orcs. Phil, Euros, Terran, you 3 have the mission of protecting the Saintess." The 3 of them immediately agreed. And while Captain Vasil was still explaining the plan, Demian in the back was silently calculating. That calm demeanor shows he must be an incredibly experienced warrior. Just like that, both sides began to clash with one another. Right at that moment, a sudden scream drew the protagonist's attention. He turned to the side and saw that Claire's group was in danger. Demian looked at their blood-red eyes filled with brutality and guessed something. It seems these monsters are becoming even more crazed. Could the Saintess's energy be their biggest threat? A shield bearer, while struggling to parry an orc's attack, yelled to signal Claire. Claire understood, clasping her hands and trying to pray. Then a dazzling golden light erupted from her body. Just by looking at it, Demian immediately recognized that light as the characteristic energy possessed by Saintesses. Holy power. Sure enough, as soon as this light spread outward, the orcs became terrified and dared not charge forward anymore. Seizing this opportunity, the soldiers began to counterattack, pushing them back. On the other side, Demian also realized, now is the time to act. If this continues, no one will leave this place alive. The captain had strictly ordered no interference in the battle, but he couldn't just stand on the sidelines. Thinking of this, he channeled power into his legs and lunged straight forward. He charged up behind the orcs, and while they weren't paying attention, Demian quickly pierced the throats of these monsters, causing their giant bodies to collapse forward. The soldier saw this and shouted in surprise, "Why are you here?" Demian had no time to explain, so he shouted loudly, "Hurry and rescue the others, be quick." The soldier gritted his teeth and turned toward Claire, muttering, "But what about the Saintess?" Demian shouted again, "Leave her to me, go." At this point, the other two didn't hesitate anymore and nodded, understood. Immediately after, they quickly ran to provide support to the others. On this side, Demian also turned to check, "Are you okay, Saintess?" Claire's face was still bewildered, seemingly unable to shake off the shock. This was more than Demian could take. He grabbed her face and shouted, "Hurry and wake up, do you want to see everyone die in this place?" Claire gritted her teeth and shook her head, "It's not like that." Demian immediately understood her condition. "Is this your first battle? That holy power earlier was likely just an instinctive outburst. Release all your holy power in that direction just like before. Right now." "I understand," Claire shouted. Then she knelt down, beginning to chant prayers too. "The great Holy Father above, your children are in dire peril. I beseech you to show mercy and bestow your blessings upon us." The prayer ended. From her body, a light even more brilliant than before erupted several times over. This made Demian feel surprised. "What is this? Who is this girl really? I thought she was just an ordinary priestess. Who would have guessed she could possess holy power as strong as a high priestess?" The moment they were hit by this divine light, the orcs hurriedly covered their faces, feeling as if their bodies were being burned. The soldiers saw this was their chance, and those who were nearby shouted loudly, "The time has come, die you beasts." The words had barely left their mouths when the whole group surged forward to attack all at once. And the orcs, affected by the holy power and unable to move, were easily finished off in a few beats. It didn't take long before all the monsters around them had been completely cleared out. "Is it all over?" someone whispered. On the other side, Captain Vasil breathed a sigh of relief and requested, "Hurry and report the casualties. Is anyone seriously injured to the point of being unable to move on their own?" A soldier approached to report the situation. "We lost 8 soldiers." Hearing this, the captain just said quietly, "Collect and preserve their bodies carefully. We will all go home together." Then he turned to Claire. "Saintess, do we need to continue advancing deeper? We still haven't found a trace of the demonic energy." Replying to the question, Claire refused. "No need, that is no longer necessary. They have certainly been infected by demonic energy. This land seems to have been completely tainted by evil energy. It is possible that there is something much more terrifying lurking deep inside. Immediately after submitting the official report, we must organize a subjugation squad." After hearing her words, the corner of Demian's mouth twitched into a smile. Finally, the subjugation squad is about to be organized, huh? Likely, a large-scale elimination force with many Saintesses will be organized, and the Neo-Caliphs unit will take the vanguard. At this moment, a young man approached Demian with an embarrassed face. By the way, thank you for saving my life." The other two also bowed and said, "If it weren't for your timely help, I wouldn't have been able to keep my life. I am very grateful for your support." Hearing them speak like that, Demian scratched his head awkwardly. "It's nothing, just a small thing." Saying that, he let out a heavy sigh. "I spent so much effort gathering these to give to the Neo-Caliphs unit." He took some herbs from his fabric pouch, and then quickly ran toward Vasil. "Hey sir, please help me certify these herb gatherers in Urkel." Vasil turned to look at him, questioning with an angry gaze. "What?" Demian held out his pouch of herbs as proof. "Do you know how unreasonably high those people in Urkel raise herb prices? They sell them 5 times more expensive than the market price in other cities. All the salary I traded with blood and tears went to buying these medicines. Use these medicinal materials to save the injured soldiers." He said this while shoving the pouch at Vasil, surprising him, but he quickly nodded, "Thank you very much." Afterward he turned and shouted to the remaining soldiers, "All troops retreat, carry the fallen comrades and take good care of the injured." On this side Claire watched Demian's figure, and a faint smile appeared.